You're watching Noir Lane. I'm your host, David. Remember, every story hides a secret, and every shadow hides a clue. Tell us what part of the world you're watching from. Subscribe and hit the like button. Join us in the mystery, and let's dive into the story. Chapter 1. The mail usually lands on Wolf's desk like tribute. Bills that believe they are entitled, invitations that believe they are irresistible, and pleas that believe they are urgent. Fritz brings it on a tray at 11, because Fritz thinks even nuisance should arrive with dignity. I sort it. Discard the obvious rubbish, and place the remainder where Wolf can reach it, without committing the vulgarity of leaning. That morning, one envelope was wrong before it was opened. No return address. No letterhead, heavy stock, clean edges, flap sealed with care, not slapped down in a hurry. The address had been typed, but the spacing wandered just enough to tell you the machine was old or the typist was tense. Fritz said he had found it tucked through the mail slot with the newspapers, as neat as a calling card. Wolf noticed it the instant I put it down. He did not touch it right away. He looked at it the way he looks at an orchid with an unfamiliar blemish, with distaste and attention in equal measure. "What is it, Archie?" he asked. "An envelope," I said, "possibly containing a letter, possibly containing regret." "Do not be juvenile," he replied. "The handwriting is absent." "It's typed," I said. "Anonymous. That makes it either a crank or a coward." Wolf's eyes narrowed. "Or a person with a reason to conceal." He took the envelope delicately between thumb and forefinger, slit it with his opener, and drew out a single sheet. There was one sentence, centered, typed cleanly, as if it had been rehearsed. "I know what you did in the Klein affair." Wolf read it once. He read it again. Then he went stone. Still not his ordinary stillness, which is merely Wolf being Wolf. This was different. It was the stillness of a man who has been struck somewhere armor does not cover. His face did not rearrange itself into panic, because Wolf does not grant anyone that pleasure, but the color around his mouth tightened, and the room felt smaller. "Wolf," I said. He did not answer. "Wolf," I said again, and leaned forward slightly. "If you spend enough years watching a man pretend nothing matters, you learn to recognize the rare moments when something does." He set the paper down with exaggerated care, aligning it square with the edge of his desk. Then he said, very quietly, "Archie." "Yes." "Seal the house," he said. I blinked. "Seal it." "Doors chained," Wolf said. "Shades drawn, telephones disconnected." That last one made my eyebrows climb. "You want me to cut the phones because of a letter, because of a sentence," Wolf corrected. "Do it now." I looked at him, then at the paper, then back at him. Klein meant nothing to me. It meant something to Wolf, and that was enough to make me obey, even if I disliked every step of it. I went to the front hall, slid the chain into place, locked the bolt, checked it twice. I secured the back door and the basement entrance. I drew the shades in the office, the dining room, the front room, and the hall. Fritz appeared quietly at the top of the kitchen stairs, his face polite but questioning. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, "what is the matter?" "A change in Mr. Wolf's mood," I told him. "A rare climate event." Fritz's eyes tightened. "Shall I call Mr. Wolf?" "No," I said, "and we are not calling anyone else either." His gaze sharpened. "The telephone." "Yes," I said. "I know. It pains me too." I went down to the basement and disconnected the line where it came in. It was not difficult. It was simply a decision, and decisions can be heavy. When I climbed back up, I felt as if I had shut off a vein. Wolf was still at his desk, eyes on the letter. "What is the Klein affair?" I asked. "It was a matter," he said. "That is not an answer," I told him. "I have just turned your house into a vault. I would like to know what treasure you think is being stolen." Wolf's eyelids lowered. "I will not discuss it now." That was unusual enough to make me stare. Wolf withholds things from clients, from policemen, from newspapermen, from anyone he considers a nuisance. He rarely withholds from me when the withholding affects my skin. All right, I said. Then tell me why the house has to be sealed. Wolf's gaze met mine. Because the sentence is not a threat, Archie, it is a timing device. A timing device for what? For events, he said. For sequence. For pressure. That was Wolf being evasive while pretending he was being clear, a specialty of his. Fritz served lunch at 12. Wolf ate with his usual thorough concentration, as if chewing were a duty to civilization. He did not speak of Klein. He did not speak of the letter. He spoke only to remark that the source was adequate, which in Wolf's language is approval. At one, he went upstairs to the plant rooms. That unsettled me. If the letter had rattled him enough to chain the doors and cut the phones, you would expect him to hover over the office like a watchdog. Instead, he went to the orchids on schedule. That meant either he was clinging to routine like a man gripping a rail in a storm, or he expected trouble and insisted on meeting it on his own timetable. At about 1:30, the doorbell rang. Once, then again, then a third time, impatient. I went to the front door and looked through the peephole. A uniformed patrolman stood on the stoop, and behind him, parked at the curb, were squad cars. Their presence made the street look smaller. I opened the inner door and spoke through the chain. Yes. The patrolman looked relieved to hear a voice. We need to speak to the occupants. We are occupied, I said. Try the next brownstone. His face did not change. Sir, there's been a homicide 2 blocks away. We have reason to believe the victim was headed here. My stomach tightened. Headed here. Yes, sir. We found this address on him. I closed the door gently and went to the office. Wolf had returned from upstairs and was seated at his desk as if he had never moved. His face was calm. His eyes were alert. The police are at the door, I said. Homicide 2 blocks away. The victim had our address. Wolf did not look surprised, which was the part I disliked most. Open the door, Archie, he said. You ordered it sealed. The seal has served its purpose, Wolf replied. Which purpose? To establish that we did not summon them, he said. Now open the door. I unchained it, opened it, and admitted the patrolman and the man behind him. The second man was plainclothes, broad-faced, thick-necked, and scowling as if the world owed him a refund. Inspector Kramer, he stepped into the hall, took one look at the drawn shades, and scowled harder. What is this? A monastery? Close, I said. It's a brownstone. He brushed past me into the office as if he owned it. Wolf sat behind his desk and regarded him with calm interest. Good afternoon, Inspector, Wolf said. Kramer's scowl deepened. Skip the manners. There's a dead man on 9th Avenue near 41st. And he had your address in his pocket. Want to explain that? Wolf's voice was flat. Sit, Inspector. You are agitated. Kramer barked a laugh. I'm agitated because my job keeps colliding with your habits. He sat anyway, because Wolf's tone can make even a cop adjust his posture. Name, Wolf said. Harvey Denton, Kramer replied. Stabbed. No wallet, no watch. Someone wanted him robbed and silenced. Wolf's eyes narrowed slightly. Denton. Kramer leaned forward. You know him. I know of him, Wolf said. Kramer's jaw tightened, and we found a typed line in his pocket. Same one you got. I know what you did in the Klein affair. I felt the room tilt. Kramer jabbed a finger at Wolf. So, want to tell me why a man carrying that sentence ends up dead near your house? Wolf regarded him for a long moment. Then he said quietly, because it was not a threat, it was a timing device. Kramer blinked. That again. What does that mean? It means, Wolf said, that the sender did not intend to blackmail me. He intended to arrange events. That sentence was a signal. To who? Kramer demanded. That is what we will discover. Wolf said. Kramer snorted. We, he says, like you're sworn in. Wolf's mouth tightened. Inspector, you have been brought here by design. I have been brought into your homicide by design. Denton's death is a step in the design. Kramer's face reddened. You're telling me this is a game? I am telling you it is a mechanism, Wolf said. One designed to apply pressure. Kramer stared. All right, Wolf, who is Denton to you? Wolf's voice was calm. Harvey Denton was associated with Simon Klein. Kramer's eyes narrowed. Klein, he sat back, memory rummaging. That was years ago, Queens. Simon Klein got himself into trouble and then vanished. There were rumors of payoff. I never liked the smell. Wolf nodded once. Correct. I leaned forward. Wolf, you never mentioned any of this. It was irrelevant until today, Wolf said. Kramer's gaze snapped to me. You didn't know. I knew as much as my chair, I said. And my chair is not chatty. Kramer's jaw tightened. Fine, but nobody leaves this house. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Inspector, I sealed this house earlier. Your order is redundant. Kramer glared at the shades. What's with the shades? Privacy, Wolf said. Or paranoia, Kramer muttered. Caution, Wolf corrected. Now, tell me precisely what was found on Denton besides the note. Kramer frowned. Not much. No wallet, no watch. A matchbook from a bar on 9th, cheap, penknife. That's it. Wolf nodded. Then he was killed elsewhere and placed. Kramer's eyes narrowed. We haven't established that. If he was stabbed in the street, there would be blood, noise, witnesses, Wolf said. There were none. Therefore he was killed quietly and deposited where your patrol route would find him. That is timing. I felt the hair on my neck prickle. Wolf was right. And Kramer knew it. Kramer hates that. Before Kramer could argue, the doorbell rang again, rapid and impatient. I went to the hall and looked through the peephole. A young man in a museum security uniform stood on the stoop, face pale, cap askew as if he had run. Down the block, another squad car had pulled in, which meant Kramer's nobody leaves had already spread. I opened the inner door, chain still on. Yes. Is Nero Wolf here? The young man blurted. Who wants him? I asked. My name is Peter Rudge, he said. I work security at the Museum of Modern Objects. I need to talk to him right now. Why? His throat moved, because someone told me if I didn't come here today, I'd be next. I brought him in. Kramer watched him like he was a suspect. Wolf watched him like he was a fact. Rudge sat on the edge of the red leather chair, hands clenched. Wolf said, Who warned you? A man I've never seen, Rudge said. He called the museum. He asked for me by name. He said, If you want to live, go to Wolf's house on West 35th today and do not use the phone. Wolf's eyes flicked to mine. The instruction matched his earlier order. Someone had anticipated lines. Kramer leaned in. Did he say why? Rudge swallowed. He said, Because of Klein. Because the truth is coming loose. Wolf's voice was quiet. What do you know of Klein? Rudge shook his head quickly. Nothing, not directly. But 2 weeks ago, in our storage annex, I found a ledger in a crate that wasn't catalogued. It had names and dates. One name was Simon Klein. Wolf's eyes sharpened. Where is the ledger now? I brought it, Rudge said, and pulled a slim notebook wrapped in brown paper from his coat. I took it and handed it to Wolf. Wolf flipped pages fast, reading not words but structure, then closed it. Archie, Wolf said, bring me my red notebook. That told me plenty. Wolf keeps very little in that safe besides money and documents that do not like daylight. I retrieved the red notebook and gave it to him. Kramer's scowl deepened. What is that? Kramer demanded. Evidence, Wolf said. Evidence you kept in a safe, Kramer snapped. Evidence is often kept safe, Wolf replied. That is why it is called evidence. Wolf placed the red notebook beside the ledger. Inspector, you have been summoned to my doorstep by a corpse placed to force your presence here. Now another man has been driven here by a warning that repeats the same instruction I gave myself. This is not random, we are being arranged. Kramer's jaw worked. I don't like being used. No one does, Wolf said. I looked at the drawn shades and the chain door and the uniforms outside. The brownstone felt less like a home and more like a box. and I realized the ugly truth of Wolf's earlier calm. The letter had not been meant to scare him, it had been meant to start the clock. And as Wolf sat there with the ledger and the red notebook, making the pieces line up inside his head, a faint tink came down from upstairs, precise and small, like glass touched lightly. All three of us heard it. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Kramer stiffened. And I had the sudden, unwelcome thought that sealing the house does not only keep trouble out, it can also keep trouble in. Chapter 2. Inspector Kramer arrived the way. Winter arrives in New York, not with drama, but with weight. Even before he spoke, the office felt smaller, as if his bulk and his temper had reduced the air supply. He stood in front of Wolf's desk with his hat in his hand, his coat unbuttoned, and his face wearing that heavy look he saves for days when the city feels rigged. Kramer can be cheerful in his own sour way when he has a clean murder, a clear motive, and a suspect who sweats. When he has a corpse that points like an accusing finger and an old name rising from the ground, he looks as if he expects the pavement to start lying. He had already told us the dead man's name on 9th Avenue, that had been at the doorway with squad cars and impatience. Now, in the office, he told us the part that mattered. "It's not Denton," he said, and slapped a small notebook on my desk as if he were delivering a bill. That name was a coat, a false one, an alias. Prints and dentals confirm it. "You ready for this, Wolf? The dead man is Grant Hale." I blinked. Wolf did not. Wolf's eyes narrowed slightly, and I knew the name did not surprise him. That bothered me more than the name itself. "Grant Hale," I repeated. "That sounds like a man who sells insurance." Kramer's mouth tightened. "He sold information, small, time investigator. Used to work for anybody who could pay, and that means he worked for too many kinds of people. Then he vanished." "When?" I asked. Kramer's eyes shifted to Wolf. "Years ago, right after the Klein affair got buried." The words landed hard. It was like hearing a door close in a house you thought was empty. Wolf's voice was calm. "You are confident of the identification?" Kramer snorted. "Dental records. Fingerprints. Not a guess. And he didn't just vanish. Goodwin, he stopped existing. No taxes, no rent, no tickets, no hospital visits. Like he went under the river and kept breathing. And now he surfaces 2 blocks from our front door," I said. Kramer nodded. "And he does it with your address in his pocket like a calling card." Wolf's gaze remained steady. "It is not my address. It is my name." Kramer glared. "It's both, and here's the part I don't like. Hale didn't just get killed near you, he got placed. We found no trail, no witnesses, and not enough blood where he was found. Somebody carried him, or rolled him, or dumped him. Then they made sure the note and your address were in his pocket," I said. "A delivery with a receipt." Kramer's look sharpened. "Exactly. Someone used Wolf's address book as a compass. They wanted my men to see his doorstep as the next stop. They staged that body to point straight at West 35th. Wolf's mouth tightened. "So you said." Kramer leaned forward, putting his hands on the edge of Wolf's desk like he wanted to shake the truth loose by force. "Now you listen, Wolf. You are involved. I don't care if you say you're not. A man tied to an old case of yours gets killed and dropped near your house. Another man shows up with a ledger that has Klein's name in it. My boys are outside, and my patience is in the basement. Start explaining." Wolf did not move. He did not raise his voice. He did not fidget. He simply looked at Kramer the way a judge looks at an attorney who has forgotten his place. "No," Wolf said. Kramer's face reddened. "Number," Wolf repeated. "I will not explain the Klein affair at your demand." Kramer's hand clenched on the desk. "Then I haul you in." Wolf's tone stayed even. "You may attempt it. You will fail. I will sit in your chair downtown and decline your coffee and your questions, and you will have lost a day you cannot afford." Kramer stared at him. "You're enjoying this." Wolf's eyes narrowed. "Inspector, enjoyment is irrelevant. Strategy is relevant. The person who wrote that letter and arranged Hale's death intends to corner me. If I rush into your arms and confess to whatever story you wish to impose, I serve his purpose." Kramer spat the words. "Your purpose is staying out of trouble." "My purpose is preventing the next death," Wolf replied. I was watching Wolf's face, waiting for something. Not fear, not guilt, but a sign of what this name did to him. He gave me very little. He always does. But the refusal itself was loud. Wolf was not refusing because he wanted to inconvenience Kramer. He was refusing because the Klein affair was a wound, and someone had just pressed a thumb into it. The room felt cold, and it was not the weather. The house was sealed, the shades drawn, and the telephone dead. With Kramer in the office, it felt like the city had put its hand over our chimney. Peter Rudge sat in the red leather chair, pale and tight, looking from Wolf to Kramer like a man watching two storms argue about which one will hit first. He was young, but he was not stupid. He understood that the safe room he had run to might be the center of the danger. Kramer turned his head and noticed him again, as if remembering that civilians complicate a neat police narrative. "And who's this?" he demanded, jerking his chin at Rudge. "Peter Rudge," I said. "Museum security." He brought the ledger. Kramer's eyes narrowed. "You work at the Museum of Modern Objects." Rudge nodded quickly. "Yes, Inspector." Kramer's gaze sharpened. "And you found a ledger with Klein's name." Rudge swallowed. "Yes." Kramer leaned closer, voice lowering. "Where is it now?" Wolf answered, instead of Rudge. "It is in my possession." Kramer's face reddened again. "Give it here," Wolf said calmly. "Number," Kramer exploded. "Number everything is no with you." Wolf's expression remained composed. "Inspector, you are loud. That is not persuasive." Kramer's jaw clenched. He looked at me as if hoping I would be reasonable. I said, "Inspector, if Wolf gives you the ledger now, it disappears into police machinery. We will see it again around the same time the subway gets renovated." Kramer glared. "I can get a warrant." "You can try," I said, "but you will need probable cause that the ledger is evidence of this murder. Wolf will tell you it is evidence of a different matter, and you will need to decide which one makes you look better." Kramer's eyes narrowed at me. "You're enjoying this?" "No," I said. "I'm coping." Wolf folded his hands on his stomach, settled deeper into his chair, and said, "Inspector, do you know why Grant Hale vanished after the Klein affair?" Kramer's eyes narrowed. "Number nobody knew that was the problem." Wolf nodded. "Correct. Yet someone knew enough to resurrect him now, dead, and drop him on your patrol route. That suggests Hale had been alive, or at least accessible, until recently." Kramer frowned. "Or someone kept him frozen in a closet." Wolf's mouth tightened. "You are being flippant," Kramer barked. "That's your job." Wolf continued, as if Kramer had not spoken. "Hale wrote me a letter, one sentence. It arrived by hand. It prompted me to seal this house. Shortly thereafter, Hale was killed and placed near my home. This implies either that Hale was killed because he sent the letter, or that the letter was sent to coincide with his death." Rudge swallowed audibly. I said, "A timing device." Wolf's eyes flicked to me, approving. "Yes, the letter is not blackmail. It is synchronization." Kramer's scowl deepened. "You're talking like this is a stage show." Wolf's voice stayed calm. "The murderer is directing, you are reacting. I refuse to react blindly." Kramer stabbed a finger toward Wolf. "Then react usefully. Tell me what Klein was." Wolf's eyes hardened. "Number." That silence landed hard. It froze the room worse than the weather. Even Kramer, who has been told no by Wolf more times than he has been told yes by his own department, hesitated. There was something in Wolf's refusal that did not belong to their usual sparring. It had a personal edge, sharp and private. Rudge spoke in a thin voice. "Mr. Wolf, am I safe here?" Wolf looked at him. His voice softened slightly, not into kindness, but into practicality. "Safer than you would be alone," Kramer snorted. "With cops outside." "Yes," Wolf said, Because the murderer has arranged for you to be watched, that can serve two purposes: to protect you or to ensure you are available. Rudge went paler. Available for what? Wolf's eyes narrowed. For pressure, for leverage, for the next step. Kramer straightened. What next step? Wolf looked at the ledger, then at his red notebook, then up at Kramer. Inspector, you said Hale vanished after the Klein affair was buried. Kramer's face tightened. Yes. Wolf's voice was flat. Then Hale's reappearance, dead, indicates the burial is being disturbed. The ledger is a shovel, the letter is a clock. Your squad cars are a fence. Kramer glowered. I'm not anyone's fence. Then stop behaving like one, Wolf said. Kramer's jaw clenched so hard I could hear it. He turned to me. Goodwin, I'm putting a man in your hall. Nobody goes upstairs, nobody goes out, nobody calls anybody, I said. We already cut the phone. Kramer's eyes narrowed. You did. That doesn't make it smart, Wolf said. Inspector, if you place your man in my hall, you will be doing exactly what the murderer intended. You will seal this house for him. Kramer's face reddened. And if I don't, you let people come and go and maybe the killer walks in with a knife. Wolf's tone stayed calm. The killer does not need a knife. He has already killed Hale without entering my house. His weapon is arrangement. Kramer opened his mouth, then closed it. He was not stupid. He was simply used to weapons that leave bruises. I broke the silence. Inspector, what about Hale's pockets? Anything besides the note? Kramer's eyes shifted to me. No wallet, no watch. Matchbook, cheap penknife, same as I said. Wolf's eyes narrowed. No keys. Kramer frowned. No keys, Wolf said. Then Hale did not intend to go home. Kramer's face tightened. Or he didn't have a home. Wolf's gaze was steady. He had a destination. It was here. Rudge's voice trembled. Why would he come here? Wolf looked at the ledger. Because he believed I would protect him, or because he intended to use me. Kramer barked. Or because somebody else told him to come here and then killed him. Wolf nodded slightly. Yes, that is plausible. Kramer's eyes narrowed. So we're back where we started? No, Wolf said. We have advanced. We have established that Hale was summoned or lured to my house and was killed before he could arrive. We have established that the death was staged to draw you here. We have established that the Klein affair is the axis. Kramer leaned forward again. And you still won't tell me what it is? Wolf's voice was quiet. Not yet. Kramer's face darkened. Why? Wolf held his gaze. Because the person who arranged this is listening for my confession. He wants my version, my admission, my panic. I will not provide it on schedule. Kramer stared at him for a long moment. Then he said through his teeth, You're telling me the killer wrote you a note, killed Hale, dumped him near your house, and expected you to talk. Yes, Wolf said. And you're refusing to talk because you think it's bait. Yes. Kramer shook his head slowly. You're impossible. Wolf's mouth tightened. I am cautious. Kramer stood abruptly. All right. I'm leaving men outside. I'm calling it in. Wolf's eyes narrowed. You cannot call. The phone is disconnected. Kramer glared at me. You did that. I did, I said. Under orders. Kramer's scowl deepened. Then I'll use the radio in my car, and Wolf. Yes, Inspector. If you're hiding something from that old case, Kramer said, voice low, and it comes out and I find you sat on it, I'll make your life miserable enough. You'll beg for an orchid to hide under. Wolf's expression did not change. Inspector, you already do. Kramer stalked out, barking at the patrolman in the hall. His boots sounded heavy on the stairs, and the front door opened and closed with the kind of finality that suggests he wished he could slam it harder. For a moment the office was quiet again. Rudge swallowed. Mr. Wolf, what did you do in the Klein affair? Wolf's eyes went to the letter. His face hardened into something older than annoyance. Nothing, Wolf said. I stared at him. Wolf. Wolf's gaze did not shift. Nothing that I regret. That was not an answer either, and it was worse because it was careful. Then Fritz appeared in the doorway, face polite, voice steady. "Mr. Wolf," Fritz said. "Mr. Panzer has telephoned from the corner. He is on his way." Wolf nodded once. Good. I felt the air tighten again, but this time with purpose. Saul coming meant information. Information is the only thing that can loosen a rigged day. Wolf looked at me. "Archie, bring me the red notebook." I slid it closer. Wolf placed his hand on it, not opening it yet, as if even looking inside was an act with consequences. Then he said quietly, "The person directing this has excellent timing," I said, "and a good map." Wolf's eyes narrowed. "Yes, he has used my address as a compass to point the police at my door. That is pressure." "And Hale," I said. "He's pressure too." Wolf nodded slightly. "Hale is also a message. He vanished when Klein vanished. Now he is dead when Klein is being disturbed. The director is telling me that buried things can be unearthed." Rudge whispered, "Why would anyone do that?" Wolf's voice was flat. "Because some men find profit in old graves." From upstairs, faint again, came the small tink of glass. Not a crash, not a shout, just that precise, delicate sound, like a signal. Wolf's eyes lifted toward the ceiling. Mine did too. The house was sealed. The phones were cut. The shades were drawn. And something upstairs had just announced that the timing device was still ticking. Chapter 3, with the telephone dead and the shades drawn. The brownstone had the personality of a vault that had developed opinions. Sound felt muffled. Time felt heavier. Even Fritz's footsteps seemed to make less noise, as if the house itself were listening. Inspector Kramer had gone, taking his bulk and his temper with him, but leaving the practical residue of police authority. A patrolman was in the front hall, stationed like a piece of furniture no one had ordered. His name, he told me stiffly, was Theodore. He was young enough to still believe regulations were a substitute for judgment, and he was determined to prove that nobody was going to cross Nero Wolf's threshold without his noticing. That was comforting in the same way a locked door is comforting when you are not sure what is on the other side. Wolf sat at his desk with the ledger and the red notebook near his right hand and his beer near his left. He looked as if he had returned to normal, which is a trick Wolf performs when he feels most abnormal. He had offered no explanation of Klein. He had offered no story of Hale. He had offered only conclusions. The trouble with conclusions is that they do not prevent things from happening. They only explain them afterward. The house made a faint tink again from upstairs. The same small, precise sound that had come twice now, like glass being touched by a careful finger. Fritz had gone up once already, and returned with his face still polite, and his eyes not. "It is nothing," Fritz had reported. That was not an answer. It was an admission of uncertainty, delivered with dignity. With the phone cut, messages had to walk. Wolf likes that. It forces the world to move at his pace. I do not like it, because my legs are not ornamental. Wolf told me, "Go to the corner, use the pay telephone. Speak to Saul Panzer if he has not arrived. And if I run into a murderer," I said. Wolf looked at me. "Be disagreeable." That is Wolf's idea of protective instruction. I took my coat, opened the inner door, and found Theodore standing in the hall with his hands clasped behind his back as if he were guarding a museum exhibit. "I am going out," I told him. Theodore's eyes widened. "You can't." "I can," I said. "Your inspector said nobody leaves without his say. His inspector is not here. Also, my employer is not under arrest, and neither am I." Theodore's jaw tightened. "Orders are orders." Wolf's voice floated from the office, calm and heavy. "Theodore." The patrolman turned his head toward the office like a man receiving a command from a larger authority than his badge. Wolf called, "Allow Mr. Goodwin to depart. You will observe and report. You will not interfere." Theodore hesitated, then nodded stiffly. "Yes, sir." I opened the front door, slipped out, and felt the city hit me with cold air and noise like a slap. 2 squad cars were still parked nearby, and a uniform leaned against one of Ian. Them watching our stoop, as if the brickwork might sprint away. I walked to the corner payphone, dropped a coin, and called Saul Panzer's office number from memory, because it is one of the few numbers in my head that has earned permanent residence. Saul answered himself, voice crisp. "Panzer, it's Archie," I said. "I know," he said. "Your number is missing." "That's the idea," I said. "Wolf wants you at the house." "I am en route," Saul replied. "I have information. The dead man's name is Grant Hale, as you know. He has not been in circulation for years. Now he is very much in circulation, in the worst way. What do you want first?" "Tell me something useful," I said. "Kramer thinks the body was placed to point at Wolf. Wolf agrees. What else?" Saul's voice stayed crisp. "Hale was employed in the past by Simon Klein, and by at least 2 other parties connected to Klein's disappearance. Hale had a reputation for selling his findings. He vanished after a large payment was made from an account associated with Klein's business partner. The partner is still alive." "What's his name?" I asked. "Martin Quayle, if he can be located," Saul said. "Financial consultant, respected, quiet. Also, he has a current address on West End Avenue." I felt the cold air deepen. "Quayle, any connection to the museum?" "Yes," Saul said. "Quayle sits on a small acquisitions committee for the Museum of Modern Objects. He is not prominent. He is present. That was the kind of information you can either file neatly or put in your pocket like a gun. Wolf is sealed in with a ledger, a red notebook, and a mystery upstairs that keeps tinkling." Saul paused. "Tinkling. Glass," I said, "or a signal, or my nerves." "I will be there in 12 minutes, Saul said, and hung up. I put the receiver back and turned. A patrolman stood near the squad car, looking at me with a face that had decided I was either important or a nuisance. It was not Theodore. This one was older, with a tired look. "You Goodwin?" he asked. "I have been called that," I said. He jerked his head toward the brownstone. "Funny house. One of our boys swears he saw a man leave it earlier." My stomach tightened. "Earlier when?" He squinted, reconstructing time. "Before Kramer got there, before the second squad car, around 1 o'clock. "That's impossible," I said. He shrugged. "That's what he says. He says a man came out fast, head down, hat pulled low, walked like he knew where he was going." "Which boy?" I asked. The patrolman nodded toward the stoop. "Theodore, he's new, sees shadows and calls them men, or sees men and calls them shadows, hard to know." I felt a flare of irritation that was really anxiety looking for a target. Theodore was inside the house now, swearing nobody moved. If Theodore had been outside earlier and saw someone leave, then either Theodore was lying now, or Theodore was wrong then. Neither option was pleasant. I walked back to the brownstone with the cold air in my lungs and the old patrolman's comment in my head. Inside, Theodore stiffened as I came in, as if my return proved a theory. "You're back," he said. "Sharp," I told him. "Now tell me something. A patrolman outside says you swore you saw a man leave the house earlier." Theodore's face reddened. "I did not swear." "You told somebody," I said. He tightened his jaw. "I told the sergeant I saw movement, a man. I was on the sidewalk when the first call came in." "You were outside," I said. "Yes," Theodore replied. "Kramer hadn't told me to post in the hall yet. I was at the stoop." "And you saw a man leave?" I pressed. Theodore hesitated, then nodded. "I saw someone come out. I did. He had a hat. He walked fast. I stared at him. Then why are you telling me now that nobody crossed the threshold?" Theodore stiffened. "Since I was posted, no one has crossed. I've been here the whole time." That was careful wording, the kind that makes a lawyer smile. I went into the office. Wolf was at his desk. Fritz stood near the door, hands clasped, face polite, eyes alert. Peter Rudge sat rigidly in the red leather chair, as if any shift might draw attention. The ledger lay closed. The red notebook sat beside it like an accusation. I said, We have a complication. Wolf's eyes narrowed. We already have several. According to a patrolman outside, I said. Theodore reported seeing a man leave the brownstone around 1 before Kramer arrived. Fritz's head turned sharply. Rudge blinked. Wolf did not move. That is impossible, Fritz said, voice firm. Wolf's gaze slid to him. Explain. Fritz lifted his chin slightly. No one crossed the threshold. I was in the kitchen. I watched the back. Mr. Goodwin was sealing the doors. The front chain was on. The back bolt was on. No one passed, I said. Theodore says he saw someone leave before he was posted inside. Fritz's eyes narrowed. He is mistaken. Wolf looked at me. Bring Theodore. I went to the hall and brought him in. Theodore stood by my desk, stiff and defensive. Wolf regarded him. Theodore, you reported seeing a man leave this house at approximately 1 o'clock. Theodore swallowed. Yes, sir. Wolf's voice remained calm. How did he leave? The front door, Theodore said quickly. He came down the steps and walked off. Wolf's eyes narrowed. The front chain was on at that hour. Theodore's face reddened. I did not see the chain. Wolf's voice stayed mild. Then you saw a man leave a door, not necessarily this door. Theodore's jaw tightened. It was this stoop. Wolf held his gaze. On what do you swear it? Theodore stiffened. On my oath, sir. Wolf turned his eyes to Fritz. Fritz, on what do you swear no one left? Fritz's voice did not waver. On my honor, Mr. Wolf. Wolf's gaze shifted to me. Archie, on what do you swear? I said. On my desire not to be stabbed. Wolf looked at Theodore again. You may return to your post. Do not embellish. Theodore left, jaw tight. Rudge exhaled shakily, so someone did leave. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Or Theodore saw something else. Either possibility is useful. Useful, I echoed. Wolf said. If someone left, he must have done so before the chain was affixed or by means other than the front door. If no one left, then someone wishes us to believe he did. I said. Either way, we have a leak. Wolf's gaze sharpened. Yes, and I suspect the leak began earlier. He tapped the letter on his desk, the one sentence threat that had turned him stone still. Archie, Wolf said, give me the envelope. I took it from the corner of the desk where I had placed it, and for the first time I really looked at it. I mean looked, not glanced. I have handled enough mail to recognize when paper has been handled by a second set of hands. The flap was sealed. Yes, but the edge was too smooth. There was a faint waviness in the paper, as if it had been exposed to moisture and then dried. The gum line was slightly uneven, and there was a faint odor, not perfume, not smoke, something like damp paper that has been warmed. I lifted it closer and ran my thumb lightly along the seam. The seal gave, almost too easily. My eyebrows rose. I opened it and looked inside. The paper itself was ordinary. No hidden second sheet, no residue. But the envelope's inner flap showed a faint crease that did not belong to a first opening. It had been steamed open, flattened, and resealed. I looked at Wolf. This has been opened before. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Show me. I handed it to him, and Wolf examined it with the same careful attention he gives a rare plant. His fingers traced the seam. His eyes studied the paper's texture, the slight distortion. After a moment he set it down. His face did not change, but the temperature in the room did. So, Wolf said quietly, it was red before I touched it. Fritz's face tightened. Impossible! It came through the slot. I brought it directly. Wolf's voice stayed calm. No, Fritz, not impossible, merely unpleasant. Rudge's voice trembled. Someone in the house read it, I said. Or someone outside opened it, read it, resealed it, and delivered it. Wolf looked at me. The envelope was delivered by hand. That implies proximity. It also implies opportunity. Archie, who had access to the mail slot this morning. I did not like the answer forming in my mind. Fritz, I said slowly. Me, and whoever stood on the stoop and pushed it in. Wolf nodded. And if it was opened before I touched it, then the person who opened it either handled it before it entered the house or handled it after, before it reached my desk. Fritz's eyes flashed with offense. Mr. Wolf. Wolf's gaze was steady. I accuse no one. Fritz, I state possibilities. Rudd shifted in his chair. But the house is sealed. Yes, Wolf said. Which is why the opening is so instructive. I said, if it was opened after it entered, then whoever did it was inside. If it was opened before, then the opener was close enough to deliver it personally, which still points close. Wolf's eyes narrowed. And now consider the timing. The letter arrives. I seal the house. Hale is murdered and placed nearby. Kramer arrives. A patrolman claims he saw a man leave. We hear glass tink upstairs twice, and the letter itself was read by someone before I read it. Fritz's voice was low. What does it mean, Mr. Wolf? Wolf's eyes were cold. It means we are not only being pressured from outside, we are being observed possibly from within. I felt the skin on the back of my neck tighten. The brownstone is home. It is not sentimental, but it is familiar. The idea of a watcher inside it is like finding a crack in your own ribs. Wolf's voice remained calm. Archie, the house is sealed. Yes, therefore, the leak must be inside. Rudge swallowed hard. Inside, who? Wolf looked at him. At present, inside includes you. Rudge stiffened. Me, I came for help. Wolf nodded. Perhaps. Or you came as the next step in the arrangement. Rudge's face went paler. I swear I did not. Wolf's gaze did not soften. I have learned that swearing is a poor substitute for proof. From upstairs came the tink again, sharper this time, followed by a soft sliding sound, like something light being dragged across wood. Fritz's eyes went toward the ceiling. Mine did too. Wolf did not move. He simply said, Archie. Yes, go upstairs, Wolf said, and discover what is making that sound. I stared at him. You want me to climb toward the noise in a sealed house with an unknown leak? Wolf's eyes narrowed. Yes. I stood because argument would waste time, and time had already been turned into someone else's tool. As I reached the door, Wolf added, almost casually, and Archie, yes. Do not go alone. I turned and looked at Fritz. Fritz was already moving quietly without complaint. His face was calm, but his eyes were hard. Good, if I had to climb toward a mystery in a sealed house, I preferred to do it with a man who can swing a frying pan with authority. We went to the stairs. Theodore in the hall stiffened, watching us. Stay at your post, I told him. He nodded, uneasy. Fritz and I started up. The air grew warmer as we climbed, carrying the faint smell of orchids and damp soil and, beneath it, something else. A thin metallic tang that did not belong to plants. At the landing, I paused and listened. Nothing. Then, from the plant rooms, the softest sound of all, a thin hiss of air, not ours, slipping through a crack. Fritz's hand tightened on the banister. I eased my hand toward the inside pocket of my coat, where I kept a small, solid paperweight that had once been a gift and now served as insurance. The house was sealed, which meant whatever was breathing upstairs was either already inside, or had always been inside, and had finally decided the timing was right. Chapter 4, the sound upstairs turned out not to be a ghost, which was disappointing only to people who like their trouble romantic. Fritz and I climbed the stairs with the kind of caution that looks comical until it saves your life. The plant rooms on the second floor were warm and damp, the air carrying the honest smells of soil and leaf, and the faint sweetness of blossoms. Wolf's orchids sat under their lights, serene and indifferent, blooming on schedule, as if murder was merely another city service. The breath we thought we heard was real enough, but it was not human. It came from a cracked transom above the plant room door, where a draft pushed in cold air from somewhere higher, a steady sigh that made the hanging thermometer twitch, and tapped the glass shade with that precise little tink. Fritz moved with quiet purpose, opening doors, checking corners, peering behind the potting bench. Nothing. No intruder, hiding among the cattleyas. No boot prints in the damp grit. Only that cold draught, persistent and wrong. "The attic," Fritz said softly. It was not a question. It was a judgment. The attic access is in the hallway above the second-floor landing. A square hatch set into the ceiling with a pull ring that most people never notice, because most people do not look up in Wolf's house. Fritz fetched a step stool. I climbed, hooked the ring, and pulled. The hatch opened too easily. That was the first unpleasant detail. The second was the smell. Not rot, not mold, but the thin metallic bite of cold air, like a refrigerator door being opened in a warm kitchen. It came down in a slow spill, and with it a faint hint of something else. Not enough to name, but enough to suggest storage. Not living. Fritz stood beside the stool, his face calm, his eyes sharp. He handed me the kitchen flashlight. Fritz keeps it in a drawer because Fritz believes the kitchen must be ready for darkness as well as hunger. I pushed the hatch up and climbed through. The attic is unfinished and wide, with rafters like ribs and insulation laid in uneven rolls. Old trunks sit in the corners, and dust gathers where it is allowed. The flashlight beam cut tunnels through the dimness. The cold draft moved across my face, and I followed it instinctively toward the rear of the house. There, near the back gable, I found the source. A small window had been unlatched and lifted half an inch. Not enough to admit a man, but enough to admit cold air and to admit the idea that someone had been here. On the sill, a smudge. On the floor beneath, a faint scuff in the dust. Not a clear shoe print, but a disturbance. Something had shifted lightly, carefully. Then I saw the third unpleasant detail. A coil of thin wire lay near a rafter. The kind used for tying packages, not the thick stuff you find in a hardware store, but fine and precise. Beside it, a small piece of waxed paper, folded and refolded, as if it had been handled often. I picked it up and felt the odd chill in it, as if it had been near ice. Fritz's voice came from below, quiet. "Mr. Goodwin." "I'm here," I called back. "Anything?" Fritz asked. "Not a man," I said. "But something has been." I climbed down and showed Fritz the waxed paper and the wire. Fritz held them delicately, as if even touching them was impolite. "It is not ours," Fritz said. "That's the nicest way anyone has ever said that," I replied. We went back down. Theodore was still in the hall, stiff as a coat rack. Wolf was still in his chair, which is where he conducts 90% of his war. He reported what we had found: the cracked attic window, the coil of wire, the cold draft, the waxed paper. Wolf listened, without changing expression. When I finished, he said, "Close the attic hatch. Lock it." I blinked. "Lock it." "Yes," Wolf said. "Now." Fritz went at once. Fritz does not argue with Wolf's tone when it turns that flat. He fetched the small attic hasp lock that Wolf keeps, for reasons Wolf never explains, and he secured it. Wolf looked at Theodore. "You will now swear the attic hatch is locked?" Theodore's eyes widened. "Yes, sir. It is locked." Wolf nodded. "Excellent. Now if someone insists a man leaves this house again, we will have one more impossibility to examine." That was about as soothing as being told your roof might be a highway. Kramer, never a man to let a mystery breathe in peace, arrived again within the hour, and this time he brought urgency and a car. "We're going to the morgue," he told me, as if it were a threat. "I've been meaning to broaden my interests," I said. Wolf refused to leave the house. Of course, he had already said so, and Wolf does not retreat from statements any more than he retreats from his chair. "You may go, Archie," Wolf said. "Observe report." Kramer glared at him. "You're not coming." Wolf regarded him. Number Kramer muttered something unprintable and motioned at me. "Move." So I moved. The city in a police car is a different city. Sirens turn traffic into obedient lines, and pedestrians look up with the brief, guilty expression of people who assume the law is always about them. We rode uptown, Kramer scowling at the windshield as if the glass had offended him. At the morgue. The air was cold enough to make your teeth feel like they had opinions. A man in a white coat led us into a room that smelled of disinfectant and inevitability. Grant Hale lay on a metal table, sheet pulled back to the collarbone, his face grey and slack in the way death makes all expressions equal. Kramer stood with his hat in his hands and looked down at the body as if it owed him an explanation. The morgue man began reciting facts, but I wasn't listening yet. I was looking. The small details are always the ones that matter. Big wounds tell you what happened. Small ones tell you how. Hale's collar was rumpled, folded inward in a way that suggested he had been handled. In the creases of those folds, clinging to the cloth like stubborn sugar, were tiny ice crystals. I leaned closer. The morgue man bristled. "Please don't touch." "I wasn't going to kiss him," I said. Kramer looked at me sharply. "What?" "Ice crystals," I said. Kramer frowned. "It's winter." "Yes," I said, and if he had been lying outside for hours, he'd have frost on the outside, not tucked neatly in collar folds where wind doesn't reach. Those crystals looked like they formed in cold storage and then started melting. The morgue man blinked. He was brought in from outside. It was cold, cold enough to preserve crystals inside fabric folds that were pressed shut, I said. He wasn't just outside. He was stored cold before he was found. Kramer's scowl deepened. "You telling me he was kept on ice?" "I'm telling you he spent time in a place colder than 9th Avenue, I replied. Kramer's jaw tightened. "That means the dump site isn't the murder scene." "Wolf said that," I said. Kramer grunted. "Wolf says a lot." The morgue man continued his recitation, but Kramer was already thinking about trucks, storage lockers, basements, and anyone with access to cold space. "In New York, you can rent a place for anything, including hiding." Then Kramer nodded at a detective who had come with us, and the man handed Kramer a small evidence envelope. "Found it in his pocket," Kramer said. He slid it out and placed it on the metal tray near Hale's hand. It was a scrap of paper torn roughly, with typed words on it. The line looked like it had been ripped from a longer note. It read, "Klein Ledger, Attic 730." Kramer watched my face. "Recognize any of that?" I said slowly. "Attic." "Yes," Kramer said. "Your attic." My stomach tightened. "And 730. Kramer's eyes narrowed. "When did Wolf order the house locked?" "He ordered the front chained and the phones cut yesterday morning," I said. Kramer's mouth twisted. "I don't want yesterday morning. I want 7:30. I thought about it, and the answer hit me with a cold certainty. Wolf had ordered the attic hatch locked after my search. We had checked the clock in the hall because Fritz always checks the clock when locking. Anything, as if time should witness it. It had been 7:30 that evening, I said. He ordered the attic hatch locked at 7:30. Kramer's face hardened. So Hale had a note that timed Wolf's order. Or someone timed Wolf's order to match the note, I said. Kramer's scowl said he disliked that distinction, but could not deny it mattered. He looked at the scrap again. Klein, Ledger, Attic 7:30. That's a list. A list with a schedule, I said. Kramer's mouth tightened, and Hale carried it. Or someone made sure he did, I replied. Kramer's eyes narrowed. We also got something else. He motioned us out into the hallway, away from the cold table and the sheet, into a space that smelled slightly less like death and slightly more like bureaucracy. Kramer lowered his voice. My desk sergeant admitted something. We were tipped before the body was reported. I stared at him, tipped. Kramer nodded, irritation tightening his face. A call came in, not the usual. Not a passerby, a calm voice. Said there would be a body on 9th near 41st. Said it would be connected to Nero Wolf. My skin prickled. That's not standard. No, Kramer said. And here's what makes my teeth hurt. The caller used phrases from the letter. I blinked. He quoted it. Kramer nodded. Klein affair. Same wording, same rhythm, like he wanted us thinking in that sentence. So he wanted you to arrive. Already pointed, I said. Kramer's jaw tightened. He wanted my men to be waiting. He wanted the street sealed. He wanted Wolf trapped. And he wanted the house sealed, I said, thinking of the attic note. Kramer stared at the wall for a long moment, then said, "That means the guy isn't fast." I looked at him. What? Kramer's eyes narrowed. He's not reacting. He's ahead. He tipped us before the body was found. He had the body cold, stored before dumping it. He had Hale carrying a note that matches a lock order that happens later. He's not fast. He grimaced. He's early. When we got back in the car, I stared out at the winter city rushing past, feeling suddenly like we were running behind a schedule written by someone else. That is a terrible feeling for a man who prides himself on improvisation. Back at the brownstone, Theodore's eyes widened at the sight of us returning, as if he had expected the day to stay in one place. Fritz met us at the door, face composed, eyes asking questions he did not speak. Wolf was in the office, of course, waiting as if time had no claim on him. I handed him the information the way you hand a man a loaded weapon. Ice crystals in Hale's collar folds, I said. He was stored cold before being found, and there was a torn note in his pocket. It says, Klein, Ledger, Attic, 7:30. 7:30 matches the moment you ordered the attic hatch locked. Wolf's eyes narrowed slightly. He did not look pleased. He looked confirmed, and, I added, Kramer admits, the police were tipped before the body was reported. The tipster used phrases from your letter's single sentence. Wolf closed his eyes for a fraction, then opened them. The killer is not fast, he murmured. He's early, I said. Wolf's gaze lifted to mine. Yes. He took a slow breath, the kind he takes when he is rearranging a map in his head, and then he said, Archie, go upstairs. I blinked. Again. Yes, Wolf said. Now we know the attic matters, and we know time is part of the mechanism. The note says attic. The envelope was steamed. The body was stored cold. These are not separate curiosities. They are one plan. I swallowed. And what am I looking for this time? Wolf's voice stayed calm, but there was steel under it. A cold place in my house, Archie. A place where a man could store a body, or store paper, or store time. I looked toward the ceiling, toward the locked attic hatch, and felt the unpleasant certainty settle in. The house had been sealed to keep something out, but the evidence kept insisting the real danger had been arranged with the house in mind, as if the brownstone itself had been measured, tested, and prepared. Wolf leaned back in his chair and said, almost pleasantly, We will see what else is waiting for 7:30. Chapter 5. If you want to dig up something buried, you need 2 tools, a shovel and permission. I had the shovel. Wolf was withholding the permission, which is one of his more irritating habits. He will send me into alleys and boardrooms and restaurants with a smile and a warning, but he will not always tell me what kind of animal I am hunting until it bites still. The Klein affair was no longer a private bruise. It had become a public mechanism, and mechanisms do not respect dignity. I started where I always start when Wolf refuses to open a drawer in his own mind. I started with paperwork. The ledger Peter Rudge had brought from the museum sat in Wolf's safe, and Wolf had allowed me a brief look under his supervision, which is as close as he comes to trust when he is cornered. The entries were old, typed names and dates and amounts, and the kind of cryptic notation that suggests someone expected to read it later and never expected someone else to read it at all. Simon Klein appeared 3 times. There was also a warehouse address in Queens, a company name that no longer existed, and a reference to an insurance claim number. That was enough for me in New York. Numbers talk if you ask them the right questions. With the phones cut, I could not just call a contact and let my voice do the work. I had to move. Moving is not Wolf's favorite verb, but it is mine. Kramer had left a uniform outside, and Theodore still haunted our hall like a conscience. I told him I was going out. He stiffened. "You can't." "I can," I said. "And if you stop me, I'll complain to your inspector, and he will punish you by making you stand in a colder hallway." Theodore looked miserable but stepped aside. Durkin, who had been loafing with purpose in the front room, came with me to the stoop and then peeled off to his own errands. Wolf had given him a list. Durkin likes lists. Outside, the city air felt like it had teeth. I walked briskly, partly for warmth, and partly because it is harder to feel hunted when you are moving like you have an appointment. My first stop was a place no one calls romantic, the Municipal Records Office. You can find out a great deal about New York's sins by paying small fees to bored clerks. I flashed my credentials, smiled the way you smile, at a woman you would not invite to dinner, and asked for old fire reports and insurance filings tied to the address in Queens. A clerk with tired eyes pointed me toward microfilm and ledgers that smelled of dust and resignation. It took time. Time was the one resource our enemy seemed to own more of than we did. But eventually I found what I needed, a warehouse fire, 8 years ago. Queens, industrial block near the river, official cause, electrical fault, unofficial rumor, accelerant, property owner, Klein Storage and Transit, principal, Simon Klein. The fire destroyed inventory. It also destroyed records. Insurance payout, substantial. Then, like smoke after a blaze, Simon Klein vanished, no arrest. No obituary, no confirmed sighting. Just a name that stopped appearing in the usual places. Names appear. I copied the report details, then looked for the claim number from the museum ledger. The insurer was a mid-level firm with a respectable name and a history of settling claims quietly when the alternative was public suspicion. In the files there was a note attached, brief and unpleasant. It referenced a claims adjuster who had handled the case, Porter Rusk. Porter Rusk was still listed as employed there at the time, then resigned shortly after the payout. I smiled. That was the kind of detail you can build a bridge out of. The second tool I needed was permission, and I was not going to get it from Wolf, so I took it from the city. I found a payphone, dropped coins, and called a contact at the insurance firm, a woman named Edna who enjoyed gossip, the way some people enjoy opera. She answered with suspicion, then warmed when I said my name. "Archie," she said, "it's been a while you in trouble." "I'm always in trouble," I said. "I just prefer trouble with documentation." She laughed. "What do you want?" "Porter Rusk," I said. "You remember him?" There was a pause. "I remember him," she said, voice lowering. "Why are you saying that name?" "Because a dead man is pointing at Wolf's doorstep, and the trail smells like old claims," I said. Edna exhaled. Rusk was good, too good. He could make numbers dance. He could make a claim look like a saint or a criminal, depending on who was watching. Then he left, said he was tired of paperwork. "What did he do next?" I asked. Edna's voice turned sour. "Security consulting. That's what they call it when they want to sound legal and expensive. He started a firm, Porter Rusk Security Solutions. A joke? He didn't secure anything. He sold access." "Access to what?" I asked. Edna hesitated. "Access to information, access to people, access to weaknesses. He'd call old contacts and ask questions that sounded harmless and always ended up costing somebody." "Has he been around lately?" I asked. Edna's voice was cautious. "Why?" "Just answer," I said. Edna sighed. "He's been sniffing around old files. 2 weeks ago, he asked about Kyle again. I told him I didn't remember. That was a lie. I remember everything. He asked about a ledger." My stomach tightened. "A ledger?" "Yes," she said. "Said he was doing a review for a client. He used fancy words. He also used the phrase, Klein affair. That's not what we called it. That's what Wolf called it when he yelled at our legal department." My skin prickled. He used Wolf's phrase. Edna's voice dropped. Archie, are you sure you want to be in this? No, I said, but I'm already in it. Edna hesitated, then added, and Archie, I saw Porter Rusk yesterday. Where? Near 9th Avenue, she said. By a coffee cart. With a man I didn't recognize. They were arguing. The man walked away fast. How did the man look? Edna paused. Small, thin, like a clerk, wore a cheap hat. Grant Hale, the dead sender. I thanked her, hung up, and stood with the receiver still warm in my hand, letting the city noise wash over me while the pieces settled warehouse fire. Missing ledger insurance payout. Simon Klein vanished. Porter Rusk handled the claim. Rusk asked about a ledger recently. Rusk seen near Hale. By the time I got back to the brownstone, my hands were cold and my mind was hot. Wolf was in the office, of course, in his chair as if he had grown there. Saul Panzer sat opposite him, calm and composed, a man who always looks like he has already read the file. Fritz hovered near the door with coffee. Theodore stood in the hall like a nervous statue. The shades were still drawn. The phone was still dead. The house felt like a stage set waiting for actors. I gave Wolf my findings briskly, because I had learned that pacing information can be as irritating as withholding it. Klein affair, I said. Warehouse fire in Queens 8 years ago, property owner Simon Klein, insurance payout. Klein vanished afterward, records destroyed, including a ledger, which explains why ledger keeps popping up. Claims adjuster on the case was Porter Rusk. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Saul's expression didn't change, but I saw attention sharpen. I continued. Rusk quit soon after, started a security consultancy. He's been asking about Klein again, and about a ledger, and a contact swears she saw him near 9th Avenue this week twice. Once yesterday arguing with a thin man in a cheap hat that would fit Hale. Saul said quietly, I can confirm Rusk has been in the vicinity. I saw him myself near the museum 2 days ago. Wolf's stillness cracked then, just a little. He shifted in his chair, a rare sign of disturbance, and his eyes went distant for a fraction, as if looking at something not in the room. Porter Rusk, Wolf said. His voice carried something I had not heard before in this case. Not annoyance, not curiosity, recognition. Wolf, I said. You know him. Wolf's mouth tightened. I know of him. That's what you said about Hale, I pointed out. Wolf's gaze snapped to mine. For a moment I saw the private fury under his composure. The Klein affair ended with an agreement, Wolf said. Saul's eyebrows rose slightly. Kramer was not present, thank God, because Kramer would have pounced on that word like a dog on meat. An agreement, I repeated. Between whom? Wolf's eyes narrowed. Between those who wish to bury it. Which includes you, I said. Wolf did not deny it. He said, I kept my part. And someone else broke theirs, I said. Yes, Wolf replied. Someone has disturbed what was buried. Saul leaned forward slightly. If I may, Wolf, if this agreement exists, it is now part of the case. Wolf's gaze went to Saul. It is part of the case. It is not part of the police file. That distinction matters. I watched Wolf carefully, because in that moment he looked older. Not physically. Wolf is always imposing, but his pride had taken on a tired edge, like a man who has carried something heavy for too long and resents having to lift it again. I said, was the agreement legal? Wolf's eyes narrowed. Was it moral? I pressed. Wolf's mouth tightened further. Wolf's gaze held mine, and in that look he admitted, without words, that survivable was closest. He said softly, Archie, there are situations in which legality and morality are luxuries. Saul's face stayed composed, but his eyes sharpened. Fritz's hands tightened briefly, then relaxed. Fritz is loyal, but Fritz does not like moral compromises in his kitchen. I said, Wolf, that's not like you. Wolf's voice was flat. Number it is precisely like me. You simply have not seen it. That stopped me for a moment. I had seen Wolf, arrogant, brilliant, stubborn, disdainful, and occasionally almost human. I had not often seen him admit that he had made an agreement that he would not want displayed in his office like a trophy, I said. So Rusk was part of it. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Perhaps, or he is now exploiting it. And Simon Klein, I said. He vanished with an insurance payout. Wolf's gaze turned cold. Yes. Vanished where? I asked. Wolf's mouth tightened. That is what the ledger would say. Saul said calmly. Then we need that ledger. Wolf nodded once. Yes. I glanced toward the ceiling, toward the locked attic hatch and the cold draft we had felt. Hale's torn note had said attic. The envelope had been steamed. The body had been stored cold. The plan kept pointing back to our house, as if the brownstone itself were part of the machinery. Wolf, I said. If the ledger is missing, and Hale was carrying a note about the attic, and we have a cold draft from up there, what's the odds? The ledger is in your attic. Wolf looked at me. His stillness was back now, but it was the stillness of a man who has made a decision. He said, Archie. Yes. You will go to the attic, Wolf said, and you will search it properly. Saul rose. I will accompany him. Wolf shook his head. Number Saul will remain here. Archie will take Durkin. I blinked. Durkin. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Yes, he is sturdier than you are. Thanks, I said. I feel cherished. Wolf ignored that, which is his usual way of showing affection. Then, he added, the part that made my stomach tighten again. And Archie. Yes. If you find the ledger, Wolf said, voice calm, do not read it first. I stared. Why not? Wolf's eyes held mine. Because if you read it, you will react, and reaction is what our director has scheduled. I understood then. Wolf was not refusing to explain the Klein affair because he enjoyed secrecy. He was refusing because his version of it was a fuse, and someone was waiting with a match. I nodded slowly. All right, I'll bring the shovel. Wolf's gaze stayed steady. Bring caution. I stood, and as I did, I caught Wolf's eyes flick toward the red notebook in his safe. He would not say whether the agreement had been legal, moral, or merely survivable. But his silence said something else. Whatever had been buried in the Klein affair was not just a case. It was a debt, and someone had come to collect. Chapter 6, if there is one thing an old New York brownstone does well, it is remember. The walls remember heat and smoke and laughter. The stairs remember the weight of men who have climbed them carrying groceries, babies, bodies, whatever the century demanded. The attic remembers what people wanted to forget, which is why the attic always feels like an accusation. Durkin arrived 10 minutes after Wolf ordered him summoned, stomping his boots in the front hall, with the innocent confidence of a man who thinks trouble is mostly physical. He took one look at Theodore in uniform, the drawn shades, and the chained front door, and grinned. What I miss? He asked. An old case coming back from the dead, I told him. Try not to step on it. Durkin's grin flattened into something more attentive. He nodded once, which is as close as Durkin comes to solemnity. Wolf gave him instructions without raising his voice, which is Wolf's version of treating a man seriously. You will accompany Archie, Wolf said. You will search the attic. You will touch nothing unnecessary. If you find a metal container or a ledger, you will bring it to me unopened. Durkin frowned. Why unopened? Because curiosity is expensive, Wolf said. Durkin accepted that the way he accepts most things, by not arguing and by preparing to be rude to anything that tried to stop him. Fritz handed us the flashlight again, and this time he handed Durkin a short crowbar from the pantry shelf. Because Fritz has lived in New York long enough to know that kitchen tools occasionally become legal instruments. We climbed. The attic hatch was locked. Theodore watched us from the landing with eyes wide and nervous, and when Durkin asked for the key, Theodore produced it with the solemnity of a man surrendering his last coin. Durkin unlocked the hasp, held the hatch down with one hand, and looked at me. After you, he said. Always, I replied. I'm the one with the pretty face. I went up first, because Wolf's orders always place me in front of whatever might be unpleasant. The cold draft met my cheeks immediately, steady and wrong. The flashlight beam sliced through dust and rafters. The attic was quiet in the way a room is quiet when it expects to be interrupted. We moved slowly, stepping on joists, avoiding the soft, deceptive insulation. Durkin's weight made the house creak, but his movements were careful. He may look like a man who could break a door with his shoulder, but he knows how to move when breaking would be noisy. The first thing I noticed was the dust. Yesterday, when Fritz and I had searched, the dust had been uniform in its neglect. Old dust is honest. It lies evenly like snow. When it is disturbed, it tells on you. Now it was telling. A faint trail ran from the hatch toward the rear gable. Not a clear shoe print, not a line, but a pattern of disturbed grit, as if someone had walked across the rafters and brushed dust with the side of a boot. The disturbance was light and deliberate, the kind of path left by someone who did not want to leave a path. Fresh, Durkin murmured. Fresh enough, I said, and careful. We followed it. The trail led toward the same rear corner where I had found the unlatched window and the coil of wire. The window was now shut and latched tight, which meant someone had been tidy enough to fix the obvious mistake. That's new, I said. Durkin leaned closer, sniffed at the sill like a hound with manners, then straightened. Cold air's still coming from somewhere. I swept the flashlight beam along the rafters and the old trunks and the boxes. There were several storage bins, cardboard warped with age, and one battered steamer trunk with a brass latch. I ignored them. They belonged to history. We were looking for the present. The dust trail ended at a section of the rear beam where the wood looked slightly darker, as if it had been handled. I reached up and touched it. The wood was cold. Here, I said. Durkin shifted, balancing on the joist, and leaned in. He ran his fingers along the beam and found a seam. Loose, he said. He used the crowbar gently, levering the beam panel outward with the finesse of a man who has pried open many things he was not invited to open. The wood gave with a soft crack, and behind it was a cavity between rafters. Inside sat a metal box. It was the size of a shoebox, grey, with a clasp and a small lock. It looked like something meant to be hidden, not stored. I felt my pulse quicken. Durkin reached for it, then paused and looked at me. "You want me to carry it?" he asked. "Yes," I said, "and do not open it." Durkin grunted, slid his fingers under the box, and lifted it carefully. The box was light, too light. Durkin frowned. "Feels empty." "Bring it down anyway," I said. We climbed down with the box held like a fragile truth. Theodore watched us with wide eyes, and I could see the relief on his face that we had not emerged with a corpse. We carried the box into the office. Wolf looked at it without moving. Saul Panzer's eyes sharpened. Fritz stepped closer, polite interest masking worry. "Set it on the desk," Wolf said. Durkin placed it gently. Wolf did not touch it at once. He looked at the clasp, the lock, the faint sheen of metal that suggests recent wiping. "Open it," Wolf said. Durkin glanced at me, then pulled a small key ring from his pocket, selected a pick, and in 3 seconds had the lock open, because Durkin believes locks are insults. He lifted the lid. The box was empty, not merely empty, but cleanly empty. No scraps, no paper, no object. Just a lining of thin felt that had been cut neatly to fit the interior. And along the edges of that felt, in a faint white trace, was frost residue, like the kind you see inside a freezer when something cold has been removed and warm air has kissed the surface. Saul leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Frost," I said. "It was kept cold." Wolf's eyes narrowed. He touched the inner edge with one thick finger, then drew his finger back and examined it. A faint dampness clung to his skin. "Yes," Wolf said quietly. "Cold storage in my attic." Durkin whistled softly. "A body?" "No," Wolf said. "Not a body, not in that size, but something that required preservation." "A document," Saul said. Wolf nodded once. "Paper can be preserved by cold. Ink can be preserved. Evidence can be preserved. I stared at the empty box and felt frustration rise. So someone hid something in our attic, in a cold box, then removed it. And left a trail, Saul added. Wolf's gaze remained steady. Yes, they wanted us to find the box. Durkin frowned. Why leave it empty? Wolf looked at him. Because an empty box is a provocation. It says, you are too late. That hit me, time again, early, not fast, I said. So where is whatever was in it? Wolf's eyes narrowed. In the possession of the director, or of the actor who believes he is directing. Fritz cleared his throat softly. Mr. Wolf, there is something. He held a paper in his hand. I had not seen him enter. Fritz can appear without noise when he believes it important. What? Wolf said. Fritz stepped forward and placed the paper on Wolf's blotter. I found it, Fritz said. Under the blotter, stuck there as if it had been slid in earlier. It was not there this morning. I stared. Fritz does not clean Wolf's desk in the middle of a case unless his hands have been directed by fate. Wolf's eyes narrowed. He lifted the paper and read it. It was on the same thick stock as the first letter. Same type, same spacing, same deliberate insult of anonymity. One sentence. You have until dinner to return what you took. Wolf read it twice, then set it down carefully, Saul's voice was calm. Summonen, with access, placed it under your blotter. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Yes. Durkin's face tightened. That means somebody's in the house. Theodore from the hall shifted and cleared his throat as if wanting to be invisible. He had been sworn. He had been watching. And yet a letter had appeared under Wolf's blotter like a magician's trick, I said. Or someone planted it earlier, and Fritz found it now. Fritz's voice was firm. Mr. Goodwin, I did not place it there, and it was not there this morning. Wolf's gaze went to Fritz. He did not question him. Wolf trusts Fritz the way he trusts his own palate. Saul said quietly, Then we have an intruder who can enter Wolf's office unseen, or who never left it. Wolf's stillness deepened. His face had that look he gets when he is angry, but refuses to grant anyone the satisfaction of seeing it as anger. He said, The letter accuses me. I said, Yes, return what you took, Durkin snorted. You didn't take anything from the attic. We just found an empty box. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Precisely. Saul's gaze sharpened. Summonen wants you to admit you did. Wolf nodded once. Yes. I felt the pieces shift. The envelope had been steamed and resealed. The attic box had frost residue. Hale's note had mentioned attic, and at time now a second letter appeared, inside Wolf's own office, accusing him of taking something. The director was not merely threatening Wolf. He was writing Wolf into the story as the thief. Wolf, I said slowly. This is an attempt to force a confession. Wolf's eyes lifted to mine. Yes, a confession of theft, I said. Wolf's voice was calm. Or a confession of something older, Saul said. The Klein affair. Wolf's mouth tightened. Yes. Durkin shifted his weight. So, what did he want back by dinner? Wolf looked at the empty box. The ledger, or what the ledger proves. I said, if the ledger was kept cold, it might be damaged otherwise, or it might have ink that fades, or it might have been written on something that decays. Saul nodded. Or it might have been blood. That made Theodore make a small sound in the hall, like a man swallowing wrong. Wolf looked at Saul, then at me. Dinner is at 7, Fritz. Fritz inclined his head. Yes, Mr. Wolf, Wolf said. Serve dinner at the usual hour. Fritz's eyes widened slightly. As you wish. Durkin frowned. We're going to sit down and eat while somebody plays games with letters and cold boxes. Wolf looked at him. Yes, that is precisely what we will do. Saul's eyebrows rose. You intend to meet the schedule? Wolf nodded. If the director has set a time, then time is part of his method. He expects urgency. He expects haste. I will not grant it. We will dine. I stared at Wolf. You're going to eat while someone inside your house accuses you of theft. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Archie, I always eat. Civilization requires it. Then his voice sharpened slightly. Also, dinner is a stage, if he says. Until dinner, he intends something to occur at dinner. Therefore, we will be present and attentive. Saul nodded slowly. A trap. Wolf's mouth tightened. An opportunity. I looked at the second letter again. The thick paper. The clean type. The one sentence designed to twist Wolf's dignity into a confession. You have until dinner to return what you took. Wolf had not taken anything from the attic, which meant the writer did not care about truth. He cared about admission. And in Nero Wolf's world, an admission is the most valuable piece of evidence there is. Wolf sat back, hands on his stomach, eyes on the empty metal box. Then he said quietly, to no one in particular, he wants me to become the culprit. I said, and if you don't? Wolf's gaze lifted to mine, calm and cold. Then, Wolf said, he will attempt to make me the corpse. Chapter 7. If you want to find out who is leaking in a police net, you do not look at the net. You look at the hands holding it. Wolf said that once, years ago, and I remember it because it was one of the rare times he used a metaphor that did not involve food or horticulture. That afternoon it felt less like a remark and more like a map. Dinner was at 7. The second letter had given us a deadline with the cheerfulness of a hangman offering you a schedule. Wolf reacted by insisting on routine, which in his mind is a form of resistance. In mine, it is a form of madness. Still, I had learned not to argue with Wolf when he intends to turn a threat into a performance. Saul Panzer left the house an hour after we found the empty frost-lined box. Wolf sent him with a single instruction: locate Porter Rusk, and do it without leaving a trail that could be used as a script. Saul is the only man I know who can tail someone and still look as if he is going to a respectable luncheon. He wears anonymity like a suit. When Saul returned, it was with the calm of a man carrying a lit match and pretending it is merely a toothpick. He came into the office, nodded to Wolf, and said, Porter Rusk is not merely present. He is active. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Explain. Saul sat, removed his gloves slowly, and spoke with measured precision. I followed Rusk from his office on West 28th to a diner on 10th Avenue. He sat inside for 10 minutes, drank coffee, and did not eat. Then he went out the back. That is not a crime, I said. No, Saul replied. It is a habit. Behind the diner, in the alley, he met a uniformed police sergeant. My stomach tightened. Uniformed. Saul nodded. Sergeant Alan Muir, precinct assignment. He is not a detective. He is not homicide. He should not be in alleys with private security consultants. Wolf's voice was flat. Go on, Saul continued. Rusk handed Muir a slim file. Muir handed Rusk an envelope. The exchange was quick. Muir did not look around. That suggests he is accustomed to being unnoticed. And the cash, I said. Saul nodded. Yes, it appeared to be cash. Wolf's eyes narrowed. A file on what? Saul's gaze was steady. On Grant Hale, or on you, or on the Klein affair. I could not see the label. But it was thin, which suggests it contained a summary, not a full record, the kind of thing a policeman produces for a client who pays. The room felt colder, not from the attic draft, from the confirmation that the net was being held by paid hands. Wolf's voice was calm. Did Rusk leave after the exchange? Yes, Saul said. He returned to his office. Muir returned to his precinct. Both behaved as if they had merely taken a walk. Wolf nodded once. Thank you, Archie. Yes. Go to the stoop, Wolf said, and observe our visitors. I blinked. Visitors. Wolf's eyes narrowed. If Sergeant Muir is corrupt, he will have an interest in this house. He will either approach, or he will be approached. You will be alert. Alert is my default, I said. Wolf did not smile. He rarely does when he is thinking about betrayal. I went to the front hall. Theodore was still there, posture stiff, eyes wary. He had the look of a man who knows his uniform makes him part of a story he did not write. I opened the inner door and looked out through the glass panel. The street was grey and cold. A squad car idled down the block. The patrolman leaning on it glanced toward our stoop, then looked away, pretending he had not been watching. I stepped onto the stoop and let the winter air hit me. It woke up my face and sharpened my thoughts. 10 minutes later, the corrupt hand arrived. Sergeant Alan Muir came up the sidewalk with the casual stride of a man who believes his badge is a passport. He wore his uniform neatly, cap set straight, shoulders squared. He looked like the kind of policeman who tells children to go home and tells adults to smile. His eyes flicked to the squad car, then to our stoop. Then to me. He stopped at the bottom step and said, "You Archie Goodwin." "I've been called worse," I said. He smiled slightly. "I need a word." "You can have several," I said. "They're free for now." His smile tightened. He climbed the step, careful, as if he did not want to be seen too close to the door. He kept his voice low. "Inspector Kramer's got this case," he said. "That's why the city looks tired," I replied. Muir's eyes narrowed. "You think you're funny?" "I am," I said. "But that's not why you're here. A sergeant doesn't come to Wolf's Stoop to chat." Muir's jaw tightened. "I'm here because there's a lot of heat. Your house is involved, and I don't like heat." "Then you picked the wrong job," I said. He ignored that. His eyes slid toward the door, toward the hall where Theodore stood unseen, and then back to me. "You people found something in your attic," he said. I kept my face neutral. "We found dust." Muir's smile thinned. "Don't play. I know the dead man was kept cold before he was dumped. I know the wound angle too." That made my stomach drop an inch. "Wound angle?" I said carefully. Muir nodded, voice low and smug. "Upward thrust, left side, clean. That tells you something about the killer's height and handedness. That detail hasn't been released." He watched my face for reaction, and I gave him nothing but boredom, which is the best weapon against a man who wants to feel powerful, I said. "That detail hasn't been released because it's not your detail to release." Muir's smile tightened. "I hear things. You hear things you shouldn't," I said. "Which means you're either a talented eavesdropper or a paid one." His eyes hardened. "Careful." I leaned forward slightly. "Sergeant, you just named the wound angle on a homicide that isn't yours. That means you have access to information you shouldn't, and you're comfortable using it as a slip of the tongue. That's not a mistake. That's a habit." His jaw clenched. "You're accusing me." "I'm observing you," I said. "Wolf's word is better, but mine will do." Muir's eyes flicked toward the street again. The squad car down the block was still there. The patrolman was watching now openly, but not intervening. That told me something too. Either he didn't know what Muir was, or he did. Muir said softly, "You tell Wolf to stop digging." I smiled. "You tell the ocean to stop being wet." Muir's eyes narrowed. "This doesn't have to get ugly." "It already is," I said. "A man is dead. Another man vanished years ago. Someone is leaving letters under Wolf's blotter. Ugly arrived early." Muir's mouth tightened. "You don't know what you're stirring." "I know you're being paid," I said. "That's what you're stirring. How much does Russ give you for a slim file? Enough to buy a conscience. Not enough to keep it." His face flushed, and I knew I had hit bone. He stepped back, smile gone, and his voice turned hard. "Watch yourself, Goodwin." "I'm watching you," I replied. He turned and walked away, not fast, not fleeing, but with the stiff dignity of a man who believes his uniform should shield him from consequences. I watched him go, then stepped back inside. Theodore was in the hall, eyes wide. He had heard none of it, but he had seen my face. "What was that?" he asked. "A lesson," I said. "Sometimes the net is full of holes because the hands holding it are paid." Theodore swallowed. He looked as if he wanted to deny that such a thing existed, but he lives in New York. Denial is expensive. I went to the office and reported to Wolf. "Sergeant Alan Muir," I said. He came to the stoop. He slipped and named the murder wound angle, upward thrust, left side details not released. Kramer's corruption net had holes, and now we could see at least one tear clearly. Saul nodded once. Calm. That matches my observation. Wolf's eyes narrowed. It confirms the arrangement extends into the police. I said, Kramer's tightening the net, but it's like fishing with lace. If Muir is paid, there may be others. Wolf's mouth tightened. Yes, therefore the police will not protect us from the director. They may assist him. Fritz entered quietly with a tray and set down Wolf's beer, because Fritz believes in steady habits even when the world wobbles. Wolf sipped, then set the glass down with care. Dinner is at 7. Wolf said. Yes, Fritz replied. Wolf looked at Saul. We will not dine alone. Saul's eyebrows rose. You intend to invite suspects? Wolf nodded. Yes. I stared. Wolf, you want to invite Porter Rusk and a corrupt sergeant into your house? Wolf's eyes narrowed. The sergeant will not be invited. He will come anyway, if his paymaster wishes it. I prefer to choose the circumstances. Saul said calmly, Whom will you invite? Wolf's gaze was steady. Porter Rusk, Martin Quayle, Peter Rudge, Theodore, if he has the sense to come. Theodore in the hall stiffened at hearing his name, then looked panicked, as if being included in Wolf's list meant being included in a coffin. He said, Theodore is a patrolman. Wolf's tone remained calm. He is also a witness who reports impossibilities. Therefore, he is either a fool or a tool. I intend to determine which. And Quayle, I said. Insurance consultant, museum committee. Wolf nodded. He has connection to Klein's financial structures. He will be present. And Rusk, I said. The security consultant. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Yes, he is the most likely actor. If he is not the director, he knows the director's script. Saul asked. And Rudge? Wolf's gaze shifted briefly to the young man in the red leather chair. Mr. Rudge brought the ledger and is now part of the mechanism. He may be innocent. He may be bait. Either way, he will be here. I looked at Wolf. You said you'd thaw the truth by inviting them into your warmest room. Wolf's mouth tightened. Yes. He glanced toward the dining room door, as if he could see through walls to the long table. The silver, the civilized ritual that he believed could force barbarians to behave. The director has used cold, Wolf said quietly. Cold storage. Frost residue. Ice in Hale's collar. Cold is used to preserve and to delay. I will use warmth to expose and to accelerate. People speak differently when they are fed, watched, and confined. Saul nodded slowly. A controlled environment. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Precisely. The brownstone is my instrument. I felt the hairs on my neck rise. Wolf was turning his house into a courtroom again, but this time the case had a personal shadow. The Klein affair was no longer just a buried file. It was a lever being pried at. I said, Kramer will object. Wolf's gaze was calm. Kramer may object, he will attend. Saul's eyebrows rose. How do you know? Wolf's mouth tightened. Because he is honest enough to dislike being manipulated. That is a weakness I can use. I glanced at the clock. The hands marched toward 7, with the steady indifference of machinery. The director had written, until dinner. Wolf was answering by making dinner a gathering. Fritz appeared again, quiet as ever. Mr. Wolf, shall I lay places? Wolf nodded. Yes, Fritz. Lay places for guests. Fritz did not blink. Fritz can set a table for 10 while murder rearranges the city. It is one of his virtues. Wolf looked at me. Archie, send invitations. With the phone cut, I said. Wolf's eyes narrowed. By foot, by taxi, by effort. Use what is necessary. I sighed. My legs will file a complaint. Wolf's expression did not change. They may do so after dinner. As I grabbed my coat and headed for the door, I had one last thought, unpleasant and sharp. If the director had set a clock and demanded a return by dinner, and Wolf had responded by filling his warmest room with suspects. Then dinner was not going to be a meal, it was going to be a collision, and the city, rigged or not, was going to watch. Chapter 8. Wolf restored the telephone the way a man restores electricity to a chair. Briefly, deliberately, and with the clear intention of making someone sit up straight. He sent Fritz to the kitchen and called down the stairs. "Archie." I went to the doorway. "Yes, you will reconnect the line," Wolf said, "for 1 hour." I stared at him. "You cut it like it was poison, and now I will use it like a scalpel," he replied. 1 hour, no more. He did not explain further, because Wolf believes explanations are indulgences you grant the obedient, not the necessary. I went to the basement with Theodore trailing at a respectful distance, as if he wanted to witness every bolt and wire, in case he had to testify to the purity of my conduct. I reconnected the line at the junction and tested the dial tone. The house suddenly felt less sealed, which was not comforting. A dead phone is a wall. A live phone is a doorway. When I came back up, Wolf had already made a list in his head and assigned it the force of law. He sat at his desk, hands folded on his stomach, and said, "You will place 3 calls." "Only 3, I said. "Only 3, Wolf replied. "First, Porter Rusk. Second, Sergeant Muir. Third, Dana Pike." The name Pike made me blink. "Pike? Who is Pike?" "Counsel," Wolf said. "Insurance counsel, Dana Pike." Saul Panzer, seated in the red leather chair with his calm face and his alert eyes, added quietly, "Dana Pike represents the insurer that paid out on the Klein warehouse fire. She reviews claims files that are too expensive to trust to adjusters." That told me enough to dislike the call already. I made the first call to Porter Rusk. He answered with a voice that had learned to sound helpful, while remaining slippery. "Rusk." "Archie Goodwin," I said. "Nero Wolf wishes to see you for dinner." There was a pause. Faint, controlled. "Dinner?" "Yes," I said. "At 7. "I do not accept social invitations from detectives," Rusk replied. "This is not social," I said, "and Wolf is not a detective. He is a man with a chair and a memory." Another pause. "What is this about?" "You," I said, "and a dead man named Grant Hale." The pause lengthened, then Rusk's voice regained its smoothness. "I will come." The second call was to Sergeant Alan Muir at the precinct desk. He answered like a man who expects to be obeyed. "Sergeant Muir." "This is Archie Goodwin," I said. "Nero Wolf invites you to dinner." His laugh was short and unpleasant. "Wolf invites a cop to dinner. He invites a sergeant who knows the wound angle on a homicide. That is not his," I said. "That is a special category of guest." Silence. Then, in a lower voice, "You are playing a dangerous game, Goodwin. Come to dinner," I said. "Or do not. Either way, Wolf will talk. He prefers an audience." Muir hesitated, then said, "I will be there." The third call was to Dana Pike, and I had to go through a receptionist who tried to sound cheerful while failing. When Pike came on, her voice was crisp, legal, and nervous underneath, which is a combination that usually means someone has already advised her to deny everything. "This is Dana Pike," she said. "Miss Pike, this is Archie Goodwin. Nero Wolf requests your presence at his home for dinner." "I do not attend dinners at private residences," Pike replied promptly. "You attend them when your file is on the table," I said. "This concerns the Klein warehouse fire, the missing ledger, and a dead man named Grant Hale." There was a faint intake of breath. "How did you get my name?" "By asking," I said. "Bring any materials you have on the Klein claim, full file, adjusting notes, settlement authorization, anything involving Porter Rusk." Her voice tightened. "Porter Rusk is not employed by us." "I did not say he was," I said. "I said his name is inside your history." She hesitated long enough that I knew she was deciding whether refusing would make her safer or merely louder. Then she said, "I will come. I am bringing my file. Bring a scarf, too," I told her. "Our house likes drafts." When I hung up, Wolf looked at me. The hour. 50 minutes left, I said. Disconnect again, Wolf ordered. I stared. Now, Wolf said, calm and immovable. I went back to the basement and cut the line. The dial tone died with a faint click that felt like a door closing. When I returned to the office, Wolf was watching the clock. Fritz entered with the quiet efficiency that makes civilized life possible, and began setting the dining room as if we were not playing host to murder, blackmail, and corruption. By 6:30, the guests began arriving, except Martin Quayle, who had not yet been located. Porter Rusk came first, too promptly for comfort. He wore an expensive coat and a face that suggested he had practiced being agreeable in mirrors. His eyes moved quickly when he entered Wolf's office, taking in Saul, Durkin, Theodore in the hall, and the drawn shades. His gaze lingered on the red notebook, then slid away as if it had burned him. Sergeant Muir arrived next. He carried his uniform like armor, chin up, shoulders squared, but his eyes kept flicking toward the door and the windows as if he suspected a camera. He greeted no one. He nodded once at Wolf with the stiff courtesy of a man acknowledging an enemy he cannot avoid. Dana Pike arrived at 6:45 with a slim leather briefcase clutched like a life raft. She was alone. She was in her 30s, hair pinned tight, face composed the way lawyers compose faces before they enter rooms that can ruin them. She looked at Wolf as if measuring how much of him was reputation and how much was threat. I was told this was urgent, Pike said. It is, Wolf replied. Sit. She sat. Inspector Kramer arrived last, uninvited and inevitable. He pushed through the front hall with the familiar scowl of a man who hates arriving at a scene after Wolf has already arranged the furniture. What is this? Kramer growled. A dinner party, Wolf regarded him. It is dinner, Inspector. You are welcome to observe. Kramer's eyes narrowed at the gathered faces. He recognized Muir's uniform and stiffened. He recognized Porter Rusk from my earlier remarks and looked as if he had bitten on grit. He looked at Dana Pike and frowned, unfamiliar but wary. We moved to the dining room, where warmth and light made the house feel almost normal. The silver was polished. The plates were set with care. The food smelled like civilization refusing to surrender. Wolf took his place at the head, as if the chair were a throne. I sat at my usual spot with my back to the wall, because habit is another kind of survival. Saul and Kramer took positions that suggested neither trusted the other. Durkin sat like a quiet threat. Theodore stood near the doorway, as if uncertain whether dinner made him a guest or a guard. Fritz served the first course and withdrew with the tact of a man who knows words can be sharper than knives. Wolf waited until forks moved, because people talk more readily when their mouths are occupied and their hands are busy pretending to be polite. Then he began. He did not speak like a man making conversation. He spoke like a judge reading a riddle into the record. The killer, Wolf said, needed cold time and access. No one answered. You could hear cutlery lightly touch porcelain. Wolf continued, cold because evidence decays. A body warms, paper yellows, ink fades, cold preserves. Dana Pike's fingers tightened on her fork. A small, hard motion, Wolf said. Time because the plan is not reactive, it is arranged. A letter delivered by hand, a body placed before it is reported, a police tip made before discovery. That is not speed. That is scheduling. Sergeant Muir's jaw clenched. Kramer's eyes narrowed at him. Seeing too much, Wolf said. Access because the brownstone was sealed, yet a letter appeared under my blotter. An attic window was unlatched. A metal box was hidden and removed. The house is the stage. Therefore the stagehand is either inside or has keys. Porter Rusk's expression did not change, but his eyes flicked once, quick toward the ceiling. Wolf's gaze moved across the table, slow and heavy like a spotlight. Mr. Rusk, Wolf said, you have a talent for access. Rusk smiled faintly. I run a security consultancy. Access is my business. Wolf nodded. Then you will appreciate that access is also the murderer's tool. Rusk's smile held, but the skin at the corner of his mouth tightened. Wolf turned slightly. Miss Pike, you appreciate time. Pike's chin lifted. I appreciate legality, Wolf regarded her. Legality is a clock with many hands. It can be stopped by money and started by fear. Pike's eyes narrowed. Why am I here? Wolf said. To translate. That word landed like a weight. Pike's eyes did not flick away, but her shoulders went tight. Wolf continued. Grant Hale was murdered after sending me a letter. He carried a torn note that read, Klein Ledger, Attic 730. The attic matters. The ledger matters 730 matters. At the word, attic. Dana Pike flinched. It was small. A tightening in her throat, a brief pause in the movement of her fork, a blink that came too quickly, but it was an answer, and Wolf never wastes answers. I watched Porter Rusk when Wolf said ledger. Rusk flinched too, but differently. His eyes sharpened. His hand paused above the plate for a fraction, then resumed, as if he had simply reconsidered a bite. It was the twitch of a man who knows the word belongs to him. Wolf saw both. He did not react openly. He filed them. Kramer saw Muir's stiffness, and Pike's nerves, and Rusk's too smooth face, and his scowl deepened into something like anger that had found a direction. Wolf said, This evening someone demanded that I return what I took. I took nothing, therefore the demand is not for a return. It is for an admission. Sergeant Muir's mouth tightened. You think you're clever? Wolf looked at him. No, Sergeant. I know I am correct. Muir's face flushed. You have no proof. Wolf's voice stayed calm. Proof is coming. It is being thawed. Fritz appeared silently, served the next course, and withdrew. The food was excellent, which only made the tension sharper. It is difficult to be vicious while eating well, but New York has never lacked for talented people. Wolf lifted his glass. We will speak plainly. Someone has paid for access. Someone has paid for time. Someone has paid for cold. Dana Pike's voice was controlled. Mr. Wolf, I cannot discuss confidential matters in this setting. Wolf regarded her. Then you should not be flinching at ordinary words. Pike's eyes flashed. I did not flinch. Wolf's tone stayed mild. You did. When I said attic, Pike's fingers tightened again. You are imagining things, I said. Wolf rarely imagines. He inventories. Kramer's gaze cut to Pike. Attic. Why would that word matter to an insurance lawyer? Pike's eyes flicked to Kramer, then back to Wolf. Because it suggests concealment, and concealment suggests fraud. Wolf nodded. Precisely, and the Klein claim was settled without the usual scrutiny. Pike's face went a shade paler. Porter Rusk said smoothly, This is all very dramatic, but I fail to see what it has to do with me. Wolf's eyes narrowed. You will not fail for long. Then, from outside, a gunshot cracked the air. It was not muffled by the shades. It was sharp and immediate. The kind of sound that turns a dinner table into a crime scene in a single heartbeat. Theodore jerked upright in the doorway, eyes wide. Durkin was on his feet before the echo died. Kramer's chair scraped back. Saul's hand moved toward his coat, as if he had been born reaching for a weapon. Wolf did not rise. He never rises when others panic. He only turned his head slightly, listening. A second later came shouting from the street. A car door slammed. Feet ran on pavement. I was moving before I realized it. Durkin beat me to the front hall, yanked open the door, and the cold rushed in along with noise and confusion. A man was down on the sidewalk near the curb, a small shape against the winter gray. A patrolman from the squad car was kneeling beside him. Blood was dark on snow. My stomach tightened when I recognized the coat Peter Rudge. He had been inside 10 minutes earlier, pale and quiet, clutching his fear like a ticket. Now he lay on the pavement with his face turned toward the brownstone, as if even in collapse he had tried to keep sight of the only place he thought might protect him. Kramer pushed past Durkin and barked orders. Call it in now. Get an ambulance. Secure the block. The patrolman shouted into his radio. I stood on the stoop with cold air biting my lungs and watched the scene harden into police procedure. Behind me, in the doorway, Wolf's voice came calm and certain. "They have tried to silence Hale's last trail," Wolf said. I turned my head slightly, not taking my eyes off Rudge. "The one person who could translate where that ledger came from," Wolf continued, voice flat. "Where it went, who handled it." He had said earlier that the murderer was not fast. He was early. Now the murderer had shown another trait. He was also punctual. And he had just answered Wolf's invitation by adding fresh blood to the schedule. Chapter 9, Rudge did not die on our sidewalk, which was either good luck or bad planning, depending on whose schedule you were reading. The ambulance arrived fast because New York can still move when it wants to, and because Kramer's voice has a way of making radios sound urgent. The patrolman did what patrolmen do, kneeling, shouting, pressing gauze, turning a citizen into a problem the city must now solve. The snow around Rudge's shoulder turned dark and slick. His face had the grey look of a man trying to decide whether consciousness is worth the effort. Durkin hovered near him like a bulldog with manners. Saul stood back, calm and watchful, eyes scanning the street for a shooter who was already gone. Sergeant Muir was somewhere behind me, and I could feel him as a presence even before I saw him again, the way you feel a draft, before you find the cracked window. Kramer barked orders, then barked again, and when the ambulance doors closed, he stood on the curb breathing hard, furious at the city, furious at Wolf, furious at himself for letting a dinner table become a shooting gallery. He turned on me. "Inside now." "I was going anyway," I said. He followed me back into the brownstone with the stomp of a man bringing winter indoors. The guests were still in the dining room, frozen in the half, civilized posture of people who had been eating soup when the world decided to interrupt. Fritz stood by the sideboard with his hands clasped, face composed, eyes shadowed with anger that he would never show Wolf. Wolf sat at the head of the table, napkin still in his lap, as if gunshots were merely punctuation. His eyes were hard, and that was new. Wolf's eyes are usually amused, or cold, or disdainful. Hard is personal. Kramer's gaze swept the room. "Nobody leaves," he snapped. Sergeant Muir shifted his weight, and the movement was almost imperceptible, but it drew Wolf's attention like a magnet draws a needle. Wolf said calmly, "Inspector, the murderer has already left. You are locking the stable after the horse has purchased a train ticket." Kramer glared. "Shut up." Wolf did not shut up. Wolf rarely does when he believes he is correct and someone is behaving loudly. "You have just provided him what he wanted," Wolf continued. "Chaos, fear, your attention diverted." Dana Pike sat rigid, her briefcase on her lap like a shield. Porter Rusk stared at his plate as if it might contain an explanation. Saul's face remained composed, but I saw his eyes flick, counting exits and people, measuring risk. Theodore stood in the doorway with the stiff panic of a man realizing his post included gunfire. Kramer jabbed a finger at Wolf. "You keep talking about directors and schedules. There's blood on your sidewalk." Wolf's voice stayed even. "Yes, therefore we must be precise." Kramer made a sound like a growl. "Precise. Fine, here's precision. That kid is alive, barely if he can talk. I want it." "So do I," Wolf said. Kramer's eyes narrowed. "You want to interrogate a shooting victim." "I want information," Wolf corrected, "which you will obtain in the hospital. I will obtain it differently." Kramer snorted. "How? Psychic?" Wolf looked at him. "By observing what you ignore." Kramer threw his hands up and stomped toward the front hall, barking into his radio. I followed him far enough to keep the peace, which is the closest I come to charity. Half an hour later, while the street outside was still bright with rotating lights and police voices, Kramer came back into the dining room with his jaw clenched. "He's alive," he said. I exhaled. Kramer continued. He spoke one phrase before he slipped into shock. Wolf's eyes narrowed. "What phrase?" Kramer looked at me, then at Wolf, as if resenting the fact that words matter more to Wolf than guns do. He said, Kramer told us, "Ice box delivery." Wolf did not react, but I felt the phrase drop into the room and settle like a weight. "Icebox delivery," I repeated. Kramer nodded. "That's it." Then he went grey, and they pumped him full of things that make him quiet. Wolf's eyes shifted toward the metal box we had found, now sitting on a side table in the office, empty and accusing. Saul spoke quietly. "The frost-lined box. Yes," I said. "Cold storage. Portable, delivered." Wolf's gaze sharpened. "Archie." "Yes." "Think," Wolf said. That is Wolf's idea of assistance. I stood there, letting the phrase work in my head. Icebox delivery, in New York. You can get almost anything delivered, including cold storage. There are services that move portable ice chests for catering, medical supplies, specialty groceries, and any evidence a man wants to keep from warming up. I said slowly, if someone needed cold, time and access, they could use a portable ice chest delivery service, a legitimate company. They bring a chilled container, they log the address and time. The delivery person does not ask what you store, they only ask who signs. Wolf's eyes hardened further. Yes. Dana Pike's mouth tightened. Porter Rusk's gaze flicked up, then down again, too quick. Kramer barked. If you're suggesting the killer hired a delivery service to bring an icebox to Wolf's house, that's a lead. Do you have a name? I have a direction, I said. And a city full of receipts, Wolf said. Archie will find the receipt. Kramer glared. How, with the phone cut? Wolf looked at him. The phone can be revived briefly, as earlier, or Archie can use your squad car radio as a courtesy. Kramer's jaw tightened, but he gestured sharply. Use my car now, and Goodwin. Yes, if you make me regret this, Kramer said, I'll make you shovel snow with a teaspoon. I'll try to be efficient, I said. Outside, one of Kramer's detectives let me use the radio and, more importantly, a working telephone in the squad car. I called information, then called a couple of catering supply services I knew, then called a medical courier company, and finally got a bite. A dispatcher at a portable cold storage delivery outfit. One of those companies with a cheerful name designed to make you forget they are delivering boxes that can hide anything. Confirmed they kept logs. Of course we keep logs, the dispatcher said. We have to chain of custody. That phrase made me smile grimly. Yes, I said. Chain of custody. I want to know if you delivered a portable ice chest to 918 West 35th Street in the last 2 weeks. The dispatcher hesitated. Who is this? Archie Goodwin, I said. Nero Wolf's office. This concerns a criminal investigation. She made a small sound of reluctance, then said, I can't give customer information without authorization. Authorization, I said, is a flexible word in New York, she sighed. Hold on. I waited, hearing the faint office bustle in the background. Then she returned with a different tone, more cautious. We did, she said, one delivery. When? I asked. A week ago, she replied. Thursday, at 11:42 in the morning. My stomach tightened. Where exactly? The dispatcher paused, reading to your address. Special note, deliver to attic access point. Customer requested discreet handling. Driver notes, used rear service entry, carried upstairs, hatch opened. I felt the cold air of the attic draft on my face again, as if memory had lungs. Who signed? I asked. The dispatcher hesitated. Name on file, Archie Goodwin. I went still. Spell it, I said. She did correctly. Too correctly, I swallowed. What did the signature look like? We have a scanned proof of delivery, she said. We can send it to an email, or you can pick it up. Print it, I said. I'll have someone collect it. Also, I want the driver's name and route. Her voice tightened. Sir, I really need authorization. Ma'am, I said, a man has been shot, another has been murdered, and your company's chain of custody just became evidence. Your authorization is reality. There was a pause. Then she said, Driver is Louis Kemper. Route includes 3 stops before yours, and 2 after. I can give you times. Do it, I said. She did. I thanked her, hung up, and sat in the squad car for a second with my hands on my knees, feeling that unpleasant mix of anger and admiration you get when you realize someone has forged not just a story but a name. Then I went back inside. In Wolf's office, the dinner party had migrated from the dining room to the more familiar battlefield of red leather chairs and Wolf's desk. Fritz had cleared plates with quiet efficiency, as if soup and murder required equal tidiness. Kramer stood near the window, glaring at the drawn shades. Saul sat upright. Calm Rusk sat with controlled smoothness. Pike sat with her briefcase, clutched tighter than before. Theodore remained in the hall. Pale Wolf's eyes met mine. "Report," I said. "Ice Chest Delivery Service confirmed a delivery to the Brownstone a week ago, Thursday at 11:42. Special instructions, deliver to attic access point. Proof of delivery includes a signature." Wolf's eyes narrowed. Whose signature? I looked across the room at my own desk, at my own pen holder, at the place where my name meant something. "Mine," I said. They signed Archie Goodwin. For a second, the room did something rare. It stopped. Dana Pike's breath caught. Porter Rusk's mouth tightened. Sergeant Muir's eyes flicked once, quick and guilty. Kramer's scowl deepened into something like fury. Wolf's face did not change. His eyes hardened. "The killer," Wolf said quietly, "did not merely stage a murder. He staged a signature." I nodded. "He staged me." Kramer exploded. "That's it. This is enough. I'm hauling people in." Wolf lifted a hand. "Inspector." Kramer's face was red. "Don't you inspector me, a forged delivery signature to your house, a shot witness, a dead investigator." "I'm done being polite." Wolf's voice stayed calm. "Politeness is irrelevant. Accuracy is relevant." Kramer glared. "You think this helps you?" "I think it clarifies the method," Wolf replied. "The director is not content with killing. He is rewriting roles. He wants me to admit theft, and he wants Archie to appear as the agent who enabled it." Dana Pike's voice was tight. "Why would anyone do that?" Wolf looked at her. "Because the Klein affair ended with an agreement, Miss Pike. An agreement that depended on silence and on believable paperwork. If someone can manufacture paperwork now, he can manufacture blame." Pike's eyes narrowed. "You keep saying agreement, Mr. Rusk," Wolf said. "You traffic in access and procedure. You understand delivery logs and signatures. Does that make you comfortable?" Rusk's smile was thin. "I understand many things. It does not make me the murderer." Rusk's eyes flicked. "Capability is not guilt." "No," Wolf agreed. "But it is a doorway." Kramer's gaze snapped to Sergeant Muir. "And you knew the wound angle. You show up at Wolf's dinner. You're in this." Muir's jaw clenched. "Careful, Inspector." Kramer barked a laugh. "Don't threaten me with careful. You took money." Muir's eyes flashed. "You don't have proof." Wolf's voice cut in, calm as a knife. "The proof is in the delivery log, in the forged signature, in the timing, in the cold." He leaned back slightly. The way he does when he has decided a point is no longer arguable. "Archie," Wolf said. "What else did the dispatcher tell you?" I said, "Driver name times route. They have a scanned proof of delivery. We can get it." Wolf nodded. "We will." Saul spoke quietly. "If the signature is forged, we should compare it to Goodwin's actual signature." Kramer snarled. "We can do that downtown." Wolf looked at him. "You may, but you will find what you already know. Archie did not order a delivery to his own attic for an ice chest." Dana Pike's voice was strained. If someone used his name, they needed familiarity. Wolf's eyes narrowed. "Yes, or they needed access to a sample." I felt a chill. My signature appears on checks, receipts, cab chits, and any number of small papers that pass through my hands. It is not hard to steal. It is merely unpleasant to see it used. Wolf's gaze moved to the empty frost-lined metal box. The portable ice chest was delivered to the attic. It contained, or enabled, something cold. The metal box was later hidden and then emptied. The sequence suggests the cold container was used to preserve an item, which was then transferred to the metal box for concealment, or the reverse. Saul nodded slowly. So the attic was a staging area. Yes, Wolf said. A stage inside my stage. Kramer rubbed his forehead, like he wanted to erase the day. And Rudge? Wolf's eyes went distant for a fraction. Rudge was the translator. He brought the museum ledger. He likely recognized the handwriting, the crate markings, the acquisition chain. He could connect names to boxes. Therefore, he was shot. Pike's voice trembled slightly. He survived. Barely, I said. Wolf's gaze hardened again. Then we must be quicker than the director expects. Kramer scoffed. You said he's early, not fast. Wolf looked at him. Then we must become early. He turned his head slightly, addressing the room as if it were already his final gathering. Tonight, Wolf said. Someone attempted to set a deadline until dinner. A dinner has occurred. The director has acted by gunshot. He has escalated. He believes he is tightening the noose. Wolf's eyes moved from Pike to Rusk to Muir, and each pair of eyes he met looked away a fraction too late. He has also made an error, Wolf continued. By forging a signature, he created a record. Records can be verified, and verification can expose the hand that made them. I said, You mean the driver? Wolf nodded. Yes, Luis Kemper, we will speak to him. We will also obtain the proof of delivery, and we will force the director to explain why he needed my attic. Kramer's voice was low and angry, and if he doesn't explain... Wolf's tone stayed calm. Then I will explain him. I looked at Wolf and saw the old familiar thing in him, the cold certainty that when he decides to take control of a case, the city's noise becomes background. But there was something else under it now. Personal. The director had not just staged a murder, and a body, and a tip and a gunshot. He had staged my name, and Wolf does not forgive men who falsify the integrity of his house. He looked at me and said quietly, Archie, prepare. For what? I asked. Wolf's eyes narrowed. For the final step. The director has brought us to the brink of confession. Now we will make him confess. Kramer muttered. You and your confession. Wolf regarded him. Inspector, you may arrest later tonight. You will listen. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, indifferent to human urgency. Somewhere in a hospital, Peter Rudge lay in shock after muttering icebox delivery, giving us a phrase like a key. Somewhere else, a man who believed he could schedule truth had just learned that Nero Wolf does not merely resist a schedule. He rewrites it. Chapter 10 Wolf's Office has hosted every variety of human discomfort, from wealthy men sweating through silk to poor men sweating through fear. But that night it felt especially suited to confession. The shades were still drawn. The air was warm from the radiators and heavy with the faint perfume of Fritz's cooking that had clung to the house even after the plates were cleared. The brownstone seemed to hold its breath, as if it had decided that whatever was about to be said would stain the walls. Inspector Kramer arrived early, which for him counts as a moral improvement. He had brought 2 detectives, and the kind of grim patience that comes when you are tired of being directed. You said you wanted a confession, he growled at Wolf. I'm here. Make it quick. Wolf regarded him with calm disdain. Inspector, speed is vulgar. Accuracy is essential. Kramer's face reddened. If you call me vulgar again, You will sit, Wolf said. And Kramer sat, because Wolf's voice can be more binding than a warrant. Saul Panzer was already present, composed and neat. Durkin stood near the door, arms folded, looking like the building's opinion made flesh. Fritz hovered briefly, then retreated, because Fritz knows when a kitchen should not interrupt a courtroom. Dana Pike sat stiffly in the red leather chair, her briefcase on her lap. Porter Rusk sat opposite her, hands folded, face smooth. Sergeant Alan Muir stood near the window, cap in hand now, attempting to look like a man who had wandered into the wrong meeting by accident. Peter Rudge was not present, which was a relief. His hospital bed had become the only safe place in the city for him. Wolf had asked Kramer to station a guard there, and for once Kramer had obeyed without argument. A shot witness tends to improve cooperation. Wolf looked at me. "Archie, bring Mr. Kemper." Luis Kemper stepped in with the hesitancy of a man who had been promised trouble and found it with the lights on. He was in his late 30s, dark hair, tired eyes, wearing a delivery company jacket that looked too thin for January. His hands were chapped, the hands of a man who lifts more weight than his pay justifies. Durkin shut the door behind him and took up position like a polite threat. Kemper's gaze darted around the office, landing on Kramer's bulk, then on the uniform, then on Wolf. He swallowed. "You're the driver," I said. "Yes," Kemper said. "I brought the cold chest. I was told I might be in trouble." Kramer barked. "You're in trouble if you lie." Kemper flinched. Wolf lifted a hand. "Inspector, do not frighten the witness. His fear is already adequate." Kramer made a sound but stayed quiet. Wolf looked at Kemper. "Mr. Kemper, you delivered a portable ice chest to this address 1 week ago, Thursday, 11:42. You carried it to the attic access point." Kemper nodded quickly. "Yes, it was a special request." Wolf's voice stayed calm. "The proof of delivery bears the signature Archie Goodwin." Kemper blinked. "Yes." Wolf's eyes narrowed. "Did Mr. Goodwin sign?" Kemper hesitated, eyes flicking to me. "I thought so." "You thought," Wolf repeated. Kemper swallowed. "I didn't know him. I didn't know anybody here. A man met me. He signed. He told me to put it where he pointed." Wolf's gaze sharpened, described the man. Kemper cleared his throat. "Average height, strong build, not fat. He wore plain clothes, a dark coat." He smiled, like he was trying to look friendly for a picture. That description could fit half the city, but the last part mattered. "He used a name," Wolf said. "Yes," Kemper replied. "He said, 'I'm Archie Goodwin.' He said it like it should mean something to me." Wolf's eyes narrowed. "Did he resemble Mr. Goodwin?" Kemper looked at me, then shook his head slowly. "Number, not really. Different face, different voice, but I didn't think. It was busy. I deliver things. People sign. That's the job." Wolf nodded slightly. "The signer wore plain clothes. But you recall his smile?" "Yes," Kemper said, relief creeping in because he was finally giving an answer that sounded useful. Wolf's gaze slid to Sergeant Muir. "Sergeant." Muir's posture stiffened. "What?" Wolf's voice remained mild. "Remove your cap. Step forward." Muir's eyes flashed. "I don't take orders from you," Kramer growled. "You do now. Step forward." Muir hesitated, then stepped. Wolf looked at Kemper. "Is this the man?" Kemper stared at Muir for a moment. Then his eyes widened. "Yes, that's him. Same jaw, same eyes, same smile." The office went still, and this time it was not Wolf's stillness. It was the stillness of a room watching a trap close. Kramer's face darkened. Muir's mouth tightened. "This is ridiculous." Wolf's voice was calm. "You signed Mr. Goodwin's name on a delivery log, Sergeant. You forged a signature." Muir's eyes flicked toward the door, toward Durkin, and found no help there. Kramer stood slowly, his chair scraping. "You want to explain that, before I explain it for you." Muir's jaw clenched. "I didn't forge anything. He's mistaken." Kemper shook his head firmly. "I'm not mistaken. I remember your face because you smiled too hard. That was the kind of detail no lawyer can shake loose." Dana Pike's breath caught. Porter Rusk's hands tightened briefly, then relaxed, the gesture of a man calculating exits. Wolf watched Rusk. His gaze was heavy, unblinking. "Now," Wolf said, "we may proceed." Kramer barked. "Proceed to what?" "The why." Wolf nodded. "Yes, the why is the frozen truth." He tapped the empty metal box on his side table, then gestured toward it as if it were a witness. "The K-line ledger," Wolf said, "was not a ledger in the ordinary sense, not merely paper. It was preserved. Dana Pike's eyes narrowed. Preserved how? Wolf looked at her. On film, Pike stiffened. That is impossible. The file was destroyed in the fire. Wolf's eyes narrowed. The paper ledger was destroyed. That is correct, but someone before the fire photographed it. Perhaps page by page. Perhaps in parts, the images were preserved on microfilm or photographic film. Film is fragile. Heat ruins it. Moisture ruins it. Time can ruin it. Cold protects it. Pike's face went pale. If you're implying our firm kept microfilm of that ledger, Wolf regarded her. I imply nothing about your firm's morality, Miss Pike, only about the facts. Someone possessed a film copy of the ledger. That copy was kept cold. An ice chest delivery to my attic provided cold storage without attracting suspicion. A metal box lined with frost residue served as a secondary container hidden behind a beam. This is why the killer needed cold, time and access. Saul spoke softly, and why the attic was chosen. Out of sight, unused, easy to access, if you have the nerve. Wolf nodded once. Exactly. Kramer's eyes narrowed. So the film is the blackmail? Yes, Wolf said. The ledger, photographed, shows the movements of money before and after the warehouse fire. It shows the insurance structure. It shows the payout. It shows where it went. And, most importantly, it shows who insured Simon Klein vanished with it. Dana Pike's voice was strained. If such a film exists, it could implicate people who are still alive. Wolf's eyes narrowed. That is the point of blackmail. Porter Rusk cleared his throat. This is speculation. Wolf turned his gaze to him. Is it? Rusk's smile was thin. You have no film. Wolf's voice remained calm. Not yet. But you do, or you believe you do. Rusk's eyes flashed. Wolf continued. Grant Hale resurfaced because you needed him. He had been involved in the Klein affair. He knew names. He knew habits. He knew how to sell information. You contacted him, or he contacted you, and the existence of the film drew him like a moth to a candle. Kramer's face tightened. Hale got murdered because he got greedy. Wolf nodded. Yes. Hale wrote me the first letter, not to threaten me but to activate the schedule. He intended to sell the ledger back to me alone, for a fee he believed I would pay for silence and to prevent scandal. I looked at Wolf, and would you? Wolf's eyes held mine for a fraction, and in that glance he admitted the painful truth. He had paid once before, not with money, but with agreement. Then he looked back to Kramer. Hale came toward my house, Wolf said. He was killed before arriving because someone feared what he might say to me privately. His body was stored cold, then placed as a public signpost. The police were tipped before discovery. That tip used the letter's phrase, "This insured you, Inspector," arrived already pointed at my doorstep. Kramer's mouth tightened, and Muir greased it. Wolf's gaze slid to Muir. Yes, Sergeant Muir ensured timing. He ensured the tip traveled properly. He ensured the patrol route, found what it was meant to find. He ensured my house was watched. He also ensured the ice chest delivery to my attic was logged under Archie Goodwin's name to manufacture culpability. Muir's face was rigid. This is nonsense. Wolf's tone stayed mild. Your denial is irrelevant. Mr. Kemper identified you. Kramer said harshly. And I'll verify your signature is forged. Then we'll talk about corruption charges. Muir's eyes flicked toward Rusk, sharp and accusing. The look of a man realizing he may be the sacrificial piece. Rusk's face stayed smooth, but his eyes hardened. Wolf turned to Dana Pike. Miss Pike, you flinched at the word attic because you know what a concealed record implies. You also know how insurance firms preserve documents, film archives, microfilm, off-site storage. Pike's voice was tight. We preserve what we must. Wolf nodded. And a clever man could obtain a copy. Pike's eyes narrowed. Porter Rusk was a claims adjuster. He had access to files. Wolf's gaze went to Rusk. Yes, he orchestrated it. Rusk's smile faded. You have no proof I orchestrated anything. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Then answer one question, Mr. Rusk. Why did you meet Sergeant Muir behind a diner and exchange a file for cash? Rusk's mouth tightened. That is not true. Saul's voice was calm. I observed it. Rusk's eyes flicked to Saul, then away. Wolf continued. You orchestrated the schedule. You used the letter to freeze this house, to force Wolf's isolation, to make him appear guilty by secrecy. You used Hale as a courier and then as a corpse. You used Sergeant Muir to ensure the police timing and to plant a forged delivery signature. You attempted to silence Peter Rudge because he could translate the film's provenance from the museum ledger entries to physical crates and deliveries. Kramer's voice was low. And where's the film now? Wolf's gaze remained steady. Not in my possession. Rusk's lips tightened. So, you have nothing. Wolf's eyes narrowed. I have what matters, motive and method, and a room full of twitching consciences. He leaned forward slightly, and the movement drew attention the way a bell draws silence. Mr. Rusk, Wolf said, you were not satisfied with blackmailing me privately. You wanted the truth to melt in public. You wanted a spectacle at my doorstep. That is why you staged Hale's body. That is why you arranged the tip. That is why you forged Archie's name. You wanted the case to become a public scandal in which my silence would appear as guilt. Rusk's face tightened. You're theatrical. Wolf's voice turned colder. You confuse clarity with theater. Wolf looked at Kramer, then at the room. And now, Wolf said, my final riddle. Kramer's eyes narrowed. Riddle great. Wolf ignored him. The letter froze this house, Wolf said, because the sender wanted the truth to melt in public. He let the sentence settle, then continued. Cold preserves evidence. Warmth exposes it. You delivered coal to my attic to preserve film. You delivered a corpse to 9th Avenue to preserve timing. You delivered a forged signature to preserve blame, all so that at the chosen moment, with police and press and scandal assembled, the truth would melt where everyone could see it. Wolf's eyes held Porter Rusk's. But you miscalculated. You assumed my pride would force me to defend myself by confession. Instead, my pride forced me to defend myself by reason. Rusk's expression flickered, just once, and in that flicker I saw fear. Kramer stepped forward. Rusk Muir, you're coming with me. Muir's jaw clenched. On what charge? Kramer's voice was harsh. Forgery, corruption, obstruction, conspiracy, and we'll add homicide the minute we tie your hands to the knife. Rusk's smile returned, briefly brittle. You can't pin murder on me with riddles. Wolf's voice stayed calm. Number Inspector Kramer will pin murder on you with evidence. Saul spoke quietly. The ice chest delivery log, forged signature, witness identification, diner exchange and phone tip record. That is enough for probable cause. Further, Hale's murder timing aligns with Rusk's movements. We can establish he met Hale twice this week. We can establish motive. Dana Pike sat very still, her briefcase still on her lap, eyes wide with the realization that her tidy legal world had just been invaded by old ash and film. Kramer's detectives moved in. Durkin shifted slightly, ready if anyone tried to bolt. Sergeant Muir looked at Rusk again, furious, then at Kramer, resigned. Rusk stood slowly. You're all making a mistake. Wolf regarded him. No, Mr. Rusk. You made the mistake. You thought you could schedule the truth. Rusk's eyes flashed. And what if I did? Wolf's gaze did not waver. Then you have discovered what happens when truth is thawed. Kramer snapped cuffs onto Muir first. Muir did not struggle. He simply stared at the floor as if it might offer him a back door. The detectives reached for Rusk. Rusk hesitated, then allowed himself to be cuffed with the stiff dignity of a man who still believes he can talk his way out later. As they were led out, Kramer paused at the doorway and looked back at Wolf. You got lucky, Kramer muttered. Wolf's eyes narrowed. No, Inspector. I got early. Kramer snorted and left. The house seemed to exhale. The tension did not vanish, but it shifted into something more manageable, like a knot loosened enough to breathe. Dana Pike stood slowly, face pale. "Mr. Wolf, if that film exists." Wolf regarded her. "It exists, Miss Pike. Whether we recover it tonight is another matter, but it exists because men do not risk so much for fantasies." Pike swallowed. "What will you do?" Wolf's mouth tightened. "I will return to my orchids." Pike blinked thrown. "That's it." Wolf's gaze was steady. "That is enough." She looked at me as if hoping for a human translation. I said, "He means the police will do the messy part now, and Wolf will do what he does best, which is look unbothered by reality." Pike managed a faint, shaken nod and left, holding her briefcase as if it were suddenly heavier. When the door closed and the house returned to its familiar quiet, Fritz entered with coffee, as if nothing had happened. He set Wolf's cup down with the same care he would use for a Sufalfi wolf, lifted it, sipped, and set it down. I stood at my desk, looking at the now empty chairs where corruption and greed had sat. My name had been forged. My house had been used as a stage. A young man was in a hospital bed because he had carried a ledger into our lives like a lit torch. "Wolf," I said quietly. "About that agreement." Wolf's eyes narrowed. "No. Archie." I held his gaze. "Was it legal?" Wolf's voice was flat. "Possibly." "Was it moral?" Wolf's mouth tightened. "Rarely." "Was it survivable?" I asked. Wolf looked at me for a long moment, then said softly, "It was the best I could do at the time." That was as close to confession as Nero Wolf ever gives, and it chilled me more than the attic draft had. Outside, the city continued its indifferent noise somewhere. A delivery company's neat logs had become evidence somewhere. Peter Rudge lay alive, and that was enough of a victory to keep me from feeling entirely defeated. Wolf rose at last, because the crisis was past and his schedule was reclaiming him. He said, "Archie, yes." "Lock the door," Wolf said. I nodded, went to the front, slid the chain into place, and felt the familiar click. For once, it felt like protection, not imprisonment. When I returned to the office, Wolf was already heading upstairs to the plant rooms, drawn by the quiet, orderly world where timing is honest and preservation is not a weapon. I watched him go and thought, not for the first time, that the most dangerous thing about a man who can manipulate cold and time is not his cleverness. It is his belief that truth is a substance he can control. Tonight, Nero Wolf had let it melt anyway.